Hey guys, you are watching your Monster Izuku fanfiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Deku mastered the power of the sun. Here is short summary. Midoriya Izuku has always dreamed of becoming a hero. When he finally manifests his quirk, it's unlike anything anyone expected, leaving both his parents and the doctor in shock. Despite the surprise, Izuku is determined to master his unique abilities. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Having two quirks is rare, isn't it? Inko questioned as she hugged her beaming child. It won't hurt Izuku, will it? He may have some trouble controlling both of them at the same time for a while. But Izuku should get used to them both after enough practice. The doctor reassured the worried mother. What I've found to be interesting is that Izuku's quirks share a link with each other. His pyrokinesis can fuel his body enhancement, and his body enhancement can help strengthen his pyrokinetic abilities. It's quite the fascinating development to see two different types of quirks working together in one person. Should we fill out two quirk registries for Izuku then? Hisashi asked, and the doctor thought for a few moments. You can hold off on filling out a quirk registry for 1 year after a child's quirk manifests to give it some time to develop and get a more accurate idea of what it can do. The doctor informed the parents. I'd suggest doing that, in this case, because his two quirks are technically linked and may be able to be registered as a single quirk once they fully manifest. Thank you for your time, doctor. Inko and Hisashi bowed, copied by Izuku, before they stood and left the office with an ecstatic 4-year-old. The following Monday morning, Izuku was dropped off at preschool and was excited to show off his quirk to Kachan. The green-haired boy instantly sought out his ash-blonde friend and made his way over to him. Kachan, I got my quirks, Izuku announced excitedly. Katsuki looked confused by the plural and questioned it. What do you mean, quirks? Katsuki asked. People have a quirk, Izuku, not quirks. The doctor said I have two. Izuku smiled widely. Oh yeah? Katsuki questioned before smirking. Let's see them then. Okay. Izuku smiled before he produced a small flame in his palm. Katsuki wasn't very impressed, but the rest of the class, including the teachers, all smiled and congratulated Izuku on his quirk. So what's this second quirk? Katsuki inquired, and the flame in Izuku's hand died out as he scrunched up his face and grew slightly taller while his musculature became bulkier and more pronounced. It wasn't a crazy increase in height or size, but he was clearly bulkier than he was a second ago. See, I told you I have two. Izuku smiled as he deflated back to his normal 4-year-old body. Can't you use them at the same time? Katsuki wondered, and Izuku shook his head. It's really hard, Izuku replied. I can only use one or the other right now. That's weird, Katsuki shrugged. If you can't use them both at the same time, aren't you not using them right? I don't know. Izuku's smile fell a bit as he thought about it. Geez, Izuku, even when you get your quirk you can't do it right. Katsuki laughed, and Izuku's face turned red in embarrassment. I'll figure it out, Izuku responded. The doctor said so. If you say so, Katsuki dismissed. Mine's still better. He grinned as he set off a series of pops with his explosion quirk. For the next year, Izuku kept trying to use his quirks properly. The two being linked made it difficult to get a grasp on using them both instead of one or the other. Sometimes Izuku would bulk up, but no fire would form. Other times it was the opposite, with a burst of fire but his body staying the same. Working hard, Hisashi smiled at his son as the Midoriya family was at a quirk training center, a place where people could go to legally use their quirks so that they could learn to control them. A good half of most of these types of facilities were set up for children to use, as it was imperative that they learn to control their quirks after they manifested. Yeah, Izuku replied. I'm going to learn to use my quirks and become a hero. The green-haired boy cheered, and both of his parents laughed at his exuberance. Ever since he'd watched All Might's debut video online, their son had decided he wanted to be a hero when he grew up. The fact that All Might had a quirk that seemed similar to Izuku's only made the young boy more determined. We know you will, Izuku. We're so proud of you, baby. Inko encouraged her son while Hisashi smiled proudly at his little man. Izuku beamed at his parents as he worked to control both of his quirks. Upon leaving the facility an hour later with a tired Izuku, the Midoriyas took the train back to their apartment. Izuku, in Inko's arms, smiled as he watched the world go by through the window. The sun shining down on the world made Izuku grin as he watched. By the time the family returned home, Izuku was full of energy and completely refreshed from his practice at the center. To be young again, Hisashi sighed fondly as he watched his son already filled with energy again. Inko nodded as she leaned her head on his shoulder and watched her baby pull out some toys to play with. A month later. Get out of my way, Deku. Bakugo growled as an explosion rang out across the playground. Izuku still didn't understand why Kacchan insisted on calling him that these past few months. Sure, he still couldn't use his dual quirk properly, but that didn't mean he was useless. That's enough, Kacchan. You already made him cry. Izuku yelled back, his arms scuffed up but otherwise uninjured from the blast the ash-blonde 5-year-old had hit him with. You think you can be a hero with your quirks? Bakugo demanded as his hands popped with mini explosions. Behind him his two lackeys used their quirks, wings, and extendable fingers, to try and intimidate him. Heroes don't hurt others, Kacchan. Izuku stated resolutely. Bakugo tsked at the green-haired boy. Just because you have two quirks doesn't mean you can be a hero. Bakugo snapped back. You can't even use them both properly. But I can use mine fully. Face it, Deku, my quirk is better than yours. Behind Bakugo his lackeys both burst into laughter at Izuku. The boy that the green-haired 5-year-old had been protecting had already fled without any of them really noticing. Izuku knew he could be a hero, his mother and father had both said so. Both of his parents had told them how proud they were of him ever since he'd learned about his two quirks. He was proud of himself. Hey, is it getting hotter? Extendable fingers, lackey asked. Wings, and Bakugo. Yeah, it is. But why? Wings, questioned. Only Bakugo quickly discerned the reason, since he knew what one of Izuku's quirks was. Hey Deku, stop trying to use your. Bakugo trailed off as he stared at Deku. All three of the boys learned two things then and there on that playground. First, what happens when you insult and demean someone's pride. Second, what it felt like to be under the gaze of someone far stronger than them. I can't be a hero. Who decided that? Izuku asked as heat waves were coming off of his body. The same body that was growing taller and packing on muscle at an astounding pace. Deku, Bakugo forced out, hating himself for stuttering. Your quirk is better than mine. Who decided that? Izuku intoned as he now stood at double his original height. The heat that was pouring off his body caused a large heat haze to surround the 5-year-old, though he certainly didn't look like a 5-year-old anymore. I will be the one to decide. Izuku stared down his three bullies looking down on the three other boys from his new superior height. All three boys bolted away from Izuku and didn't stop running until they'd left the playground completely. This was the day that Bakugo Katsuki learned fear for the first time. It was also the day that began his complete dislike of his once friend. A seething feeling of anger, fear, and inferiority developed in the ash blonde that he would struggle with for years to come. For Izuku, he suddenly realized that he was using both his quirks at the same time. I did it, I did it. Izuku cheered as he threw his hands up and made his way back to his home just across the street from the playground. He took the stairs 3 at a time with his current size and was soon standing in front of his door. Opening it quickly, he kicked off his shoes in the entryway and rushed into the kitchen where his parents were. Needless to say, both Midoriyas were shocked at this boy suddenly being in their home. But one look at his face and both parents knew this was their son. Izuku, Inko questioned, her face set in a worried look. Mom, Dad, I did it. I'm using both my quirks at the same time. Izuku smiled and Hisashi smiled happily at his son. That's great, Izu. Hisashi congratulated. But could you turn down the temperature a little? He asked with a chuckle. Izuku looked sheepish for a moment, just now noticing that his parents were both sweating from his heat, and quickly shrank back down to his normal size. Sorry. Izuku apologized and Inko moved forward to hug him while reassuring him it was okay. Izuku smiled happily at finally making progress with his quirk. Another month later of Izuku practicing and testing out his full quirk led the family to discovering that his quirks were easier to use during the day, especially if it was sunny outside. This had prompted a trip to the doctor's and another interesting discussion. Doctor's office. So Izuku's ability is stronger when it's sunny. The doctor asked for confirmation before getting nods from all three Midoriyas. I'm not all that surprised. Most pyrokinetics say they feel their quirk is stronger during the daytime, especially on a sunny day. Though we're not quite sure why that is, to be honest. So it's normal then? Inko asked and the doctor nodded. A very common trait among fire-based quirks. The doctor assured her. Now that Izuku has a handle on his power, did you want to register it today? The doctor asked and both parents looked at their 5-year-old son. What do you think, Izu? Hisashi asked his boy. Can I name it? Izuku asked with his green eyes shining. Of course you can, baby. Inko instantly agreed as she hugged her baby. I want to call it, the sun. Izuku exclaimed, his fists raised high. Both Hisashi and the doctor chuckled at the 5-year-old, but the doctor turned to his computer and started filling in the quirk registry. Is this because you can make fireballs now? Hisashi teased his son, making Izuku turn red in the cheeks. It's cause the sun helps my quirk, Dad. Izuku replied with a small pout. Inko kissed the top of his head while Izuku held out his hands and brought a baseball-sized fireball into existence between them. But they do look like the sun. He smiled as both his parents agreed with him as they looked at the red-orange ball of flames. The Midoriya family left the doctor's office that day with plans to celebrate with ice cream, along with a copy of Izuku's brand new quirk registry. Registry. Name: Midoriya Izuku. Quirk: the sun. Type: hybrid mutant emitter. Registry. Izuku would spend the rest of his elementary school years training his quirk. He was often praised, alongside Katsuki, for his powerful quirk and his desire to be a hero. Everybody believed that Izuku was going to make a great hero in the future, and the green-haired boy tried to humbly accept the praise like his parents told him to. There was the realization in the last year of elementary school that Izuku became rather confident when he used his quirk for extended periods of time. That had prompted another visit to the doctor. Thankfully, the doctor had been able to quickly figure out that Izuku's body enhancement also increased the amount of hormones his brain released. With the extra dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, and testosterone in his system, it was natural for him to become confident and self-assured until he powered down. First year of junior high, second semester. Did you hear about the new transfer? A student a row over from Izuku whispered to his friend during lunch. The blonde girl, Toga I think her name is. His friend whispered back. Yeah, I heard she was from a pretty wealthy family. The first boy quietly spoke. Then why is she at a public junior high like Aldera? The second student questioned in a hushed tone. I heard she's a violent weirdo that attacked another student at her old school. The first student said. I could see it. The second boy nodded. Have you seen her eyes? She's got those cat-like eyes that look at you like something to play with. He shivered at the memory. Where is she anyway? The first boy questioned. She left right as lunch started. The second student responded. Hopefully she's not hurting anybody. How crude. Talking about someone behind their back. Izuku admonished both of the boys as he stood up from his desk and left the room. Both boys shrank back from the green-haired boy. No one wanted to potentially anger the normally kind Midoriya. They'd all seen what he was capable of in PE during the quirk application course. Where would I go if I was a new student and didn't want to be near anyone talking bad about me? Izuku pondered as he walked before noticing the sign for the stairs that led to the rooftop. Good a chance as any. He nodded as he made his way up the stairs. Opening the door to the rooftop, he stepped out into the sunlight and smiled. The sun had always made him smile, and he always felt full of energy when bathed in its rays. Looking around, he saw the new girl, Toga, huddled in the shade of the stairwell wall. Go away, Toga muttered dully. The blonde was clearly not in the mood to deal with people. It would be rude of me to leave you by yourself, Izuku replied as he walked closer before stopping a few meters from the girl. Get back. Toga trailed off as Izuku noticed she was gripping her arms tightly. A look into her eyes showed a storm of emotions behind the yellow cat-like eyes. I can't. I want, she mumbled to herself while gazing at him unsettlingly. Are you all right? Izuku asked, now worried the girl might be having some kind of fit or possibly a panic attack. I want. Toga stared at him, her gaze getting darker, for lack of a better term. What do you want? Izuku asked, fully prepared to get the girl whatever she needed to help with this attack. Blood. Toga yelled as she leapt forward and swung at Izuku with her nails. Very sharp nails that had been filed to a point, Izuku noticed. The green-haired boy felt his quirk surge through him as he bulked up and heat began to emanate from his body. He quickly caught the blonde girl's wrists and looked into her distressed face. Calm down, Toga, Izuku firmly requested of the girl he now towered over. Seeing the blonde looking frantic, as well as feeling the kicks to his legs, if only barely, he spoke again. Why are you acting this way? My quirk, blood, I need. Toga was obviously trying to communicate but having difficulty because of her fit. Your quirk is making you act this way. Izuku wanted to confirm, getting a shaky nod from the writhing blonde. With a nod of his head, Izuku touched his thumb to the sharp nail of Toga's thumb hard enough to draw some blood. Blood. Toga's eyes zeroed in on the red liquid as Izuku let her wrists go and held out his bleeding thumb. If blood is what you need, then here. Izuku smiled down at the blonde girl who didn't hesitate to literally put Izuku's thumb in her mouth and start licking and ing on it. This seems almost erotic. The green-haired boy thought to himself as his cheeks turned a bit red. After a few seconds, Toga's eyes cleared up and she snapped them wide open. How? I've never, from so little, impossible. Toga tried to form words but appeared too stunned to do so. Izuku tilted his head curiously as the blonde pulled his thumb from her mouth. She still lapped at it every time the blood beat it up, again, but her eyes were sharp and clear of the haze they seemed to have been in when Izuku found her. Are you better now, Toga? Izuku questioned and the blonde girl nodded to him. Thank you, Midoriya, right? Toga asked for confirmation. Izuku nodded with a smile and Toga continued. My quirk needs blood to activate. So sometimes I get this really strong desire to acquire blood. When I ignore it for too long, well, here she motioned to the rooftop to indicate the altercation they'd just had. A quirk? Side effect, then? Izuku asked and Toga nodded. Well, I'm glad I could help you out. He smiled at the girl. I've never been able to come out of the fit with so little blood before though. Toga admitted while licking his thumb again. Your blood is amazing. It's so rich, sweet, powerful. I don't know how to describe it. But I don't feel like I want blood at all now. Usually I need more before I'm even close to back to normal. How often do these fits happen? Izuku asked as he sat down with his back against the stairwell wall. Toga followed him quickly, keeping his hand with the bleeding thumb in her grip. They've been happening more often as I get older. Toga answered. The doctors my parents took me to said it was because my quirk was naturally growing stronger. Usually even after I come out of a fit, there's still this little feeling in the back of my mind that wants to find more blood. But just this little bit of yours. Toga paused to lick another bead of blood from his thumb. And even that little feeling is completely gone. I'd be happy to help you out if I can. Izuku offered, another warm smile on his face. Toga suddenly felt her heart thump in her chest. She liked that smile. Really, really liked it. It felt warmer than even the sunlight on her skin right now. You would, really? Toga questioned and Izuku nodded, his smile still warming her from the inside out. Thank you, Midoriya. Maybe I can finally have a normal school year for the first time since 4th grade. Don't mention it, Toga. Izuku grinned as he forced the red from his cheeks when Toga licked his thumb again. So, what do you want to do when you grow up, Midoriya? Toga questioned and Izuku practically glowed when he started talking about his dream to be a hero that saved people with a smile. Toga felt so warm talking with Izuku like this. Hearing about his dream and passion to be a hero just made her want to smile. So, What's your quirk, Toga? I just realized I didn't ask about it. Izuku smiled as he took out a notebook from somewhere and looked poised to take notes. You're a quirk nerd too. Toga giggled and Izuku chuckled as he shrank back down to his normal size. The danger had clearly passed and his thumb had already healed. Now was the time to learn about another interesting quirk. I suppose you could say that, Izuku admitted with a grin. The two spent the rest of lunch chatting, and seeing Izuku go wide-eyed when she told him about her quirk absolutely made Toga's day. The cute way his face turned completely red when she mentioned the naked part of her quirk sent her into full-on laughter as Izuku blushed and stammered. The two quickly became friends before lunch was even over, and, unbeknownst to Izuku, he was Toga's first friend since her quirk manifested its side effect when she was 5. Some might say this day was also the first step for the man that would come to be known as the proud hero, Escanor. For even though he didn't know it, this was the very first time he ever saved someone. Though the girl that he saved would always know and would never forget it. Second year of junior high. Thanks for agreeing to help me out, Izuku. Toga smiled as she stretched and limbered up. It's no problem, Toga. Izuku smiled at the girl. He and Toga had been friends for months now. Apparently hearing him talk about being a hero so passionately had inspired Toga to try as well. The blonde girl had confided in Izuku that aside from him, every person she'd met had thought her quirk was creepy or villainous. But after listening to Izuku, with his encouragement and belief that her quirk could be great for heroics, Toga is determined to prove all of those people wrong. She'd be a hero, she'd help people with her creepy and villainous quirk. Are you ready? Toga questioned as she withdrew some wooden training knives she'd ordered off the internet. She needed blood for her quirk to work, so using a bladed weapon made sense. Plus she was always rather limber and agile, so the lightweight weapons would complement that. Anytime. Izuku nodded and Toga dashed forward. Izuku bulked up and his body began to produce heat as Toga quickly closed the distance. The first strike came, a stab, which Izuku sidestepped to avoid. Toga swung the other knife towards his stomach and Izuku took a large step back. You're pretty fast, Toga. He complimented the blonde who only grinned at him. For such a big guy you're fast too. Toga giggled as she threw one of the wooden training knives. Izuku moved aside to dodge and Toga was suddenly inside his reach preparing to stab him in the side. Izuku grabbed the hand with the knife and stopped it dead with his far superior strength. Without any strain Izuku pushed Toga back and the blonde went flying backwards several meters before her feet touched the ground. Whoa, you're even stronger than I thought, Izuku. Toga smiled at him as she got her footing back. How'd you sneak up like that? Izuku questioned curiously. I dodged the throw knife and then you were already in my guard. People lose track of things around them when they focus on a single object. Toga grinned at him. Your vision focused on the knife coming at you and you lost track of me. It's called tricking the eye. Magicians and ninja use it to pull off sneaky stuff. Huh, that's neat. Izuku nodded with a thoughtful look on his face. You ready to continue? Sure thing. Toga grinned and she picked up her other wooden training knife and the two started again. Second year of junior high, summer break. Why'd we come to this place to practice? Toga asked Izuku as they stood in front of a large facility with a high wall surrounding a large amount of land. Because this place allows full quirk use on their large fields. Izuku informed the blonde. You did say you wanted to see more of the pyrokinetic side of my quirk, right? Ooh, I get to see that today. Toga practically started bouncing in excitement. She'd been so curious about Izuku's pyrokinetic abilities. But regulations on pyrokinetic quirks were strict, for obvious reasons, so she hadn't been able to see much. The two quickly rented a large, rocky field for an hour and once they arrived Izuku immediately bulked up. Make sure you stay back a bit, Toga. Izuku advised the blonde. My flames are really hot and even the heat they put off can cause first-degree burns if you're too close. I'm back. Toga grinned as she skipped off to the side and watched as Izuku was covered in a heat haze. Fire whipped up around the large muscular form of her green-haired friend. Toga smiled widely at finally seeing Izuku's pyrokinetic ability in full for the first time. He wasn't kidding about the heat though. She could feel it from where she stood dozens of meters away. Gentle sun, Izuku spoke and a ball of flames appeared above his palm. The bright yellow-orange flames swirled around and Toga marveled at the ease of control. With a motion of his arm, Izuku sent the ball of fire flying towards a large rock on the field. There was a blast of flames, larger than Toga expected, and when the fire dispersed the rock was scorched black. That was cool, Izuku. Toga cheered as she waved her arms excitedly. Ha ha ha, I'm glad you think so, Toga. Izuku chuckled at her mirth, his voice having a noticeable change in depth. Izuku was normally a tenor in voice type, but when he bulked up and used his quirk, his voice got deeper and became a baritone voice type. Toga hadn't told Izuku, but she found his voice appealing in both forms. Can you do more? Toga asked with a wide smile. Of course, this is merely a sample of my power, Izuku proclaimed, the lowest and the most gentle of my named attacks. With that he held up his right hand, palm facing the sky, and a massive ball of flames swirled forth. Toga actually craned her neck to see the top. The heat had jumped considerably, and even as far away as she was still sweating in a matter of seconds. This is midday sun. It's an area of effect move that superheats the surroundings and forces villains to surrender as they succumb to the heat. I could see it, Toga agreed as she fanned her face with her hands. She was still further away, as she had been, and she had sweat running down her already. She couldn't imagine how hot it must be directly beside the massive ball of flames. Izuku continued to demonstrate his pyrokinetic control and some different variations of his attacks for Toga. The blonde was mesmerized by how much work Izuku had put into his quirk over the years. This wasn't a level of control that someone just had. This was clearly the result of years of dedication to practice and refining his quirk. Toga truly admired Izuku's drive to be a hero. That the green-haired boy put everything he had into his dream was inspiring. She also found it attractive like nobody's business. She was most definitely crushing on her friend. Our time is almost up, Toga, Izuku informed her as he looked towards the large digital clock on the side of the facility facing the field they were in. Would you like to see anything else before we leave? Do a big attack, Izuku. Toga cheered. A really big one. A big attack, you say? Izuku grinned with a proud look on his face. Very well. Izuku leapt up into the air with his enhanced body, easily clearing 20 meters, before calling forth another ball of fire. This ball was different than the gentle sun he'd shown at the beginning. The center of the ball was a bright white and the flames almost seemed to be compressed into a smaller space. Izuku held the compressed ball of fire above his palm as he took aim at a large pile of stones at the end of the field. Cruel sun, the verdette intoned as he launched the ball at the rocks. Toga watched on as the ball smashed into the rock pile at speed. The resulting blast almost knocked her off her feet from the shockwave. Holy! Toga trailed off as she spotted the remains of the large pile of stone. The entire area that had once been littered with large rocks and boulders had been half melted into molten rock. The hot liquefied stone poured down the remaining surface of the largest rocks to form a large pool of lava on the ground around them. Seems I still have a ways to go, Izuku mused as he looked at his handiwork. I meant to melt them all in one shot. Izuku, that was crazy awesome. Toga cheered as Izuku walked towards her and shrank down to his normal state. Thanks, Toga, I appreciate it. Izuku smiled kindly at the blonde as he stood before her. I didn't know you had that much power. The excited blonde gushed as they walked back towards the facility. What kind of villain could stand up to that? Hopefully not many. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. Potentially a powerful pyrokinetic villain, or maybe one that had some kind of incredible fire resistance as a side benefit of their own quirk. But their quirk would probably be. The verdette started to mutter and mumble and Toga couldn't stop her giggles when she saw Izuku get like this. She thought it was so cute how he could mumble on and on about quirks like this. Earth to Izuku, Toga teased and Izuku snapped out of his muttering. Oh, sorry about that, Toga. Izuku blushed slightly. Don't worry about it, Toga waved off. I think it's cute. See cute. Izuku was now full-on blushing red. Toga giggled at his reaction before leaning closer with a grin. Yep, cute, Toga confirmed. Now come on. I need to get home and take a shower. You might not sweat from the heat you can put out, but I sure do. Oh okay. Izuku stuttered slightly as he followed along with his friend. End of second year of junior high. Please go out with me. Izuku bowed to Toga as he held out a letter to the surprised blonde. The verdette's face was bright red as he forced himself to be braver than he usually felt when not using his quirk. Really? Toga blushed as well as she took the letter and quickly read it. It wasn't overly long, but the feelings behind the words on the paper came through powerfully. Izuku's feelings were genuine and Toga felt her heart thump in her chest while a smile took over her face. Yes, the blonde answered her own crush's confession. She couldn't believe it. Izuku liked her like she liked him. This was the best day ever. You will. Izuku looked up and the two locked eyes without even meaning to. Both smiled at each other reflexively before Toga practically threw herself into Izuku's arms. Of course, Izu-kun. Toga laughed happily as they held each other. I've liked you for a long time. Izuku tightened the hold he had on Toga at her own confession. I'm glad, Toga. Izuku was promptly cut off as Toga put her index finger on his lips. Himiko. Toga smiled at him. Call me Himiko. Izu-kun, only you get to call me that. Alright, hi Himiko. Izuku smiled even with his cheeks pink. We'll work on it. Toga giggled as she leaned in and placed a soft kiss on Izuku's lips. The verdette's eyes shot wide open at the sudden kiss and he was almost certain his flames might have come out for a second. When she pulled back from the chaste kiss, Toga broke out into full laughter at the stunned look on her new boyfriend's face. Hey, I wasn't expecting that. Izuku tried to defend his shocked state. You're too cute, Izu-kun. Toga claimed as she snuggled into his arms. I can live with that. Izuku smiled as she held her close and the new couple enjoyed the warmth of their embrace. Izuku proved he was a bit of a romantic under his quirk nerd and hero fanboy personality after they started dating. Toga certainly didn't mind being loved and doted upon in public. Going to the mall, the movies, festivals in the summer, even out to eat at small restaurants the two would pass while out and about. This was made easier since their parents had met already. Toga had explained her sudden control of her fits shortly after she and Izuku became friends. The Toga family and Midoriya family had gotten together for a thank you celebration not long afterwards. Her parents were so pleased that she could lead a normal life without her fits. Toga just wanted to be with Izuku. She didn't really care what was considered normal. But having her parents' approval led to less questions and more time spent with her boyfriend. Third year of junior high. You're all third years now. It's time for you to start seriously considering your futures. Their homeroom teacher told the class as he looked at them from the podium. While normally I would pass out these career aptitude tests, why bother? I know you all want to be heroes. The entire class, barring 3, cheered as they showed off their quirks. Yes, you all have very nice quirks, but using them at school is against the rules. So restrain yourselves. Hey, sensei, don't lump me in with all these extras. Bakugo spoke up. This lot would be lucky to end up as sidekicks to a busted D-lister. I'm the real deal. Predictably his fellow classmates had something to say about that as they all tossed insults his way. Bring it on. I'll take you all on. You do have impressive test results. The teacher commented. Maybe you will get into UA. Cue the shocked exclamations of the rest of the class that Bakugo was trying to get into the #1 hero school. That's why UA is perfect for me. Bakugo replied as he stood up from his seat. I aced all the mock tests. I'm the only one at this school that deserves to get into UA. I'll be more popular than All Might himself and become the richest hero of all time. People all across the world will know my name. And it all starts with UA. Ah yes, Midoriya and Toga, you both applied for UA as well, right? The teacher asked looking over his paperwork. Izuku exhaled, knowing Bakugo's temper was going to flare up. Yes, sensei. Izuku and Toga replied, and all of their classmates whispered among themselves. Toga caught her boyfriend's eye and winked at him with a grin. The look in her eyes was one of happiness and pride. Happy that they were both going to follow their chosen path as heroes, and proud at the work the two of them had put in together to get to where they were now. Deku! Bakugo yelled, his hand flaring with his explosion quirk. Or it was for about a second before the blonde's hand was caught in Izuku's, now much larger, hand. The verdette had accessed a portion of his quirk and grown a few inches while his physique bulked up noticeably. Bakugo might as well have been a child punching an adult's palm. His small explosions didn't even make Izuku's skin turn red. The green-eyed teen was far more fire-resistant than the explosion quirk user after all. Stop being violent, Bakugo. Izuku told the ash blonde. He didn't yell or even raise his voice. But Bakugo understood the command in the other teen's voice, even while he scowled at Izuku. This was another thing Toga had helped Izuku with, standing up for himself and being more confident, even when he wasn't fueled by his quirk. Bakugo, return to your seat immediately. We have class to start. The teacher yelled, and Bakugo scoffed angrily as he stomped back to his desk. Class continued normally for the most part after that, and the rest of the day was spent with Izuku either ignoring Bakugo's constant glares, or catching Toga's eyes while she looked at him approvingly. His girlfriend sneaking in lustful or naughty looks throughout the day just to make him squirm. She knew what she was doing to him too. The little minx. Midoriya apartment, after school. That was so hot, Izuku. Toga cooed into his ear as she straddled her boyfriend's lap. You shut that jerk down completely. The blonde girl licked her lips as she opened his uniform jacket and ran her hands over his shirt-covered chest. Himiko, my mom is only going to be gone for a short time. Izuku worried even as his hands ran up his girlfriend's legs and settled on her hips. The two of them in his room sitting on his bed. She'll be gone for at least half an hour. Toga grinned as she pulled her uniform shirt over her head. Izuku's eyes immediately took in his girlfriend's bra-clad s. Toga wasn't body-conscious in the slightest. She knew she was cute, and Izuku reminded her of how beautiful she was often. Her boyfriend was quite the sweet talker without even meaning to be. We should set an alarm at least, Izuku suggested even as he let Toga pull his shirt over his head. Already did, Toga giggled, showing him the active alarm on her phone before she tossed it onto his bedside table next to his phone. Their lips met as Izuku leaned back, pulling her down on top of him. They wouldn't go all the way, neither of them felt ready for that yet. But Toga would definitely make sure Izuku knew when she felt ready. But first, let me get this off, Izu-kun, she breathed out huskily as she removed her bra, letting him gaze on her B-cups. You're beautiful, Himiko. Izuku gazed at her lovingly. He had to be the luckiest guy in the world to have a girlfriend like her. I love it when you say my name like that. Toga purred as she pulled his lips to hers. The moan she let out as his warm hands began to caress her s would have gotten them caught if his mom had been home. The rest of the couple's third year was spent practicing with their quirks and increasing their martial skills in preparation for the UA entrance exams. Also more dates and homework sessions. Izuku and Toga walked from the train station to the UA campus hand in hand, smiles on both of their faces. Toga was happily snuggled into Izuku's side. Having his girlfriend by his side was doing wonders to keep Izuku's nerves from flaring up. Izuku and Toga were simply enjoying their closeness as they stopped to look up at the large building that was the best hero school in Japan. Out of my way, Deku. Bakugo growled at the other teen as he made his way past Izuku and Toga without so much as a glance back. He hadn't even acknowledged Toga being there at all. Bakugo is in his usual mood. Izuku shook his head at the ash blonde's attitude. Arrogant prick, Toga grumbled as her left hand drifted down to where she kept her butterfly knife hidden. That does seem appropriate, Izuku chuckled before kissing her cheek. Toga's hand left her knife and quickly went up to her cheek. She giggled happily as they both followed the signs to the written exam location. The written exam wasn't easy, as expected of UA, but both Toga and Izuku felt they did well enough on it to pass. When it came time to learn what the practical exam entailed, Izuku had a small fanboy moment at seeing the voice hero, present Mike on stage going over the details. Toga giggled as she watched. But a growl to, "Shut the hell up," from Bakugo, who was sitting next to them, brought the moment to an abrupt end. Toga was seriously contemplating stabbing the explosive prick for ruining the moment. Getting called out by another examinee, a blue-haired teen with glasses and a very strict demeanor, had both Izuku and Toga quieting down. Though Toga muttered threats against the glasses-wearing teen until Izuku took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. After the explanation was complete, the couple found out that they wouldn't be in the same exam site with each other. "It's okay, Himiko-chan, you're going to ace this," Izuku reassured his girlfriend with a confident smile. "I think I need a good luck kiss." Toga grinned with a look in her eyes while she licked her lips. Izuku met her lips with his in a brief kiss before they separated. Toga pouted about the kiss being too short. She even tried to hold Izuku to herself longer, but they had to get on their respective buses. Exam Site B. "Alright, here we are, let's begin." Izuku psyched himself up as he stood outside Exam Site B. The verdette began to bulk up and increase in size. A visible heat haze surrounded his body as he tapped into his hybrid quirk. Many of the other examinees looked on in shock. The verdette teen suddenly went from average height to standing well over 2 meters tall. He towered over everyone else in the exam easily. "Start." Present Mike called out loudly from where he stood on a platform at the top of a tower, his voice reaching out across the large testing grounds and to all the various groups of applicants. Everybody in Izuku's testing group froze up for a moment at the sudden start. Izuku being the exception as he used his massive strength to launch himself into the test site immediately. "What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real life. Run. Go. Go." Mike yelled out to all of the stunned examinees. With no one in his way, Izuku was the first to find the mass of faux villain robots on the main street. Knowing he wouldn't have long until the other examinees caught up, Izuku began his attack. Target acquired. Eliminate. Several of the robots intoned, and Izuku couldn't help but smirk as he formed a large, compressed, fireball in his right hand. "I am not the target here," Izuku stated with utter surety. "You are." With that, the teen threw the powerful fireball at the horde of machines. The first dozen or so were burned through without trouble, perfectly circular portions of their metal bodies missing. As the fireball traveled through one robot after another, it eventually destabilized and exploded. The blast rocked the street and made windows nearby shatter from the shockwave. Most of the examinees, who'd just arrived on the scene, stood with their mouths agape at the fact that a single guy had just taken out every robot on the main street. Within the first 30 seconds of the exam, in a single massive fireball, Izuku had already secured his place in UA High's hero course. Perhaps I should have held back. I don't know how many points I earned now," Izuku mused, realizing he didn't have any way of knowing what his current score was. Staff Control Room. "Oh my, quite the powerful examinee we have this year," Nezu, the chimera-like principal of UA, commented after watching Izuku's attack. "With the lack of collateral damage, beyond some broken windows, it's clear that the young man has worked very hard on his control. That much power and the road is only blackened a bit. That's rather impressive, to say the least." Smentos agreed with Nezu. Exam Site C. 1 down. Toga smiled as she sliced the hydraulic line of the first one-pointer she came across. These robots all had rather obvious, weak spots, to exploit if you knew how. The machine, with the loss of pressure, couldn't lift its large arms and crashed into the ground before powering down. Toga grinned as she skipped off to find another target. The larger 2-pointers and 3-pointers might be a problem, but she'd still try and find a way to take them down too. She was getting into UA and staying with Izuku. No exam was going to stop her. As luck would have it, a 2-pointer spotted her just as she rounded the corner of a building. The large machine targeted her, but Toga was already moving. With focused eyes, she leapt up onto the larger robot's back. Losing sight of its target sent the machine into a scanning mode. This was all the time Toga needed to notice the button at the base of the robot's neck. "Is that a Power button. The blonde girl questioned before pressing it. The robot immediately lost power and fell to the ground. Oh, that's useful. She grinned viciously. With this new knowledge, Toga happily skipped through the mock cityscape. Every villain bot had a power button on it. If you could find out where the button was for each type, they could be disabled without having to destroy or damage them at all. Toga had already found out where the button was on the 2 pointers. Finding it on the 3 pointers was a little more difficult. I guess I can see why it's up here. Toga pouted as she pressed the button between the 2 missile launchers. She'd had to leap, flip, and basically parkour her way onto the 3-pointer. It was way harder than the 1-pointer or 2-pointer. But that makes 34 points for me. Toga wasn't the only examinee that had noticed the power buttons in her testing site. A girl, judging by her voice, was running around the site topless and turning off the robots too. This would have seen her disqualified if her quirk wasn't invisibility, which made it hard for the villain bots to target her in the chaos of the exam. Toga and the girl almost seemed to be in competition for who could turn off the most robots. I'm pretty sure I'm winning. Toga nodded to herself. But just in case, the blonde leapt off the disabled 3-pointer and rushed a 2-pointer before anyone else could target it. Exam Site B. In the last 2 minutes of the test, the giant gimmick robot, the 0-pointer, was unleashed. Izuku had been going around the test site helping others that got cornered or overwhelmed, mostly by using his ridiculous strength to destroy the robots. The green-haired teen watched as the giant robot moved its way down the main street of the fake city towards him. Every examinee around him began to run from the colossal machine. The horde of teens quickly ran past the stationary Izuku. With a smirk, one bordering on arrogant, Izuku chuckled as he walked towards the behemoth. I see why it's just a gimmick. Not many quirks are compatible with an enemy of that size. Izuku mused as he continued to walk forward. The 0-pointer caused buildings to collapse as it passed them. Izuku briefly noticed a brunette girl turn and dash down a side street to get away from the falling rubble. A smart move, considering trying to run down the main street would have only placed her in the machine's path. Feeling the rays of the sun on his skin, Izuku set a firm look on his face. You'll go no further, he stated with finality. Izuku called forth his flames with a thought. The entire area surrounding him began to waver from the heat haze. The temperature spiked so much that, warning, messages appeared in the staff observation room. Izuku didn't know this, of course, but continued to channel his power. The street and buildings near him began to smoke from the rapidly increasing heat. Izuku raised his right hand into the air, palm up. The flames quickly began to swirl around this focal point. A fireball formed and rapidly grew in size. Be thankful that noon has already passed. My pyrokinetic abilities are at their strongest during the sun's zenith. Izuku spoke to the 0-pointer as it continued to roll towards him. The massive ball of flames was at least 15 meters in diameter at this point. To everyone watching's surprise, the teachers included, the massive ball began to shrink. The fireball was compressing into itself like a star about to go supernova. The center of the flames went from yellow to pale white. The center got brighter and brighter until it was a dazzling white that was hard to look at. Eventually the center glowed with a bright blue color surrounded by a halo of intense white. Cruel sun. The much smaller ball of intense flames, now only about 3 meters in diameter, rocketed towards the advancing 0-pointer. The superheated ball burrowed into the titanic machine with ease. To the further shock and surprise of the onlookers, the massive 0-pointer was lifted off the ground and carried into the air. Superheated air was blasting out of the hole in the machine's chest, as it flew higher and higher into the air. 1 meter, 10 meters, 100 meters, 500 meters, a kilometer. The 0-pointer, a robot just over 60 meters tall, now looked like a small green dot in the sky. Pride flare. Izuku clenched his fist and the green dot in the sky exploded in a massive fireball. The explosion was so large everyone in each of the test sites could see the blast. Even the people in town saw and heard the massive explosion in the sky. Exam Site C. That was awesome, Izu-kun. Toga cheered loudly, swinging her arms up and down like an excited child. The massive explosion could only be her Izuku. No one else in the exam could possibly have that much firepower. She laughed loudly in her excitement and all the examinees stared at the sky in shock. Two things were only noticed by the most observant of watchers. One was that despite the zero-pointer exploding there was little to no debris or shrapnel falling to Earth. Only tiny pieces of rapidly cooling metal would hit the ground around exam site B. The second thing was all of the villain bots shutting down automatically as the exam ended. Staff observation room. Ahahaha. Nezu laughed loudly at seeing what the green-haired examinee had done. My robot, Power Loader muttered seeing his creation obliterated. What the hell is this kid? Vlad King questioned the room. He got only silence in response, beyond Nezu's laughter anyway. The rest of the staff could only stare wide-eyed at the power Izuku had just displayed. Even a thin blonde man in the back of the room couldn't help but gape in shock at the power wielded by the teenager. Exam Site B. Oh, right. Stop. Present Mike's voice was heard throughout the testing grounds. The exam is over. Izuku exhaled as he let his quirk release and started to both cool off and shrink back down. He was fairly certain he'd gotten enough points to pass the practical, even if he hadn't actually been able to count them all. I can't wait to find out how many points Himiko-chan got. Izuku smiled as he walked back to the bus. He didn't pay any attention to the other examinees gaping at him or giving him a wide berth. He was more focused on seeing his girlfriend again. Izuku climbed onto the bus and sat in the first seat. He'd be able to exit the bus faster when they got back to the main campus. UA. Main campus. Izu-kun. Toga cheered as she launched herself into her boyfriend's arms. Himiko-chan. Izuku laughed as he caught her flying glomp. That was awesome. Every test site saw and heard your blast. Did you blow up the zero-pointer? That's gotta be it, right? Toga chattered excitedly with a grin. Izuku couldn't help but smile back at his excited girlfriend. Yeah, I got a little into the exam and saw the gimmick as a challenge. Izuku smiled sheepishly. Toga's eyes widened, along with her smile, as she looked at her boyfriend. Oh, did my Izu-kun get all riled up? Toga teased as she pressed herself against him. Do you need me to help you calm down and relax? She whispered breathily into his ear. Himiko-chan. Izuku exhaled as he pulled her closer. Don't be naughty in public. Toga giggled as she took his hand and led him towards the gates. Then let's go somewhere private, Izuku-kun, Toga teased as she pulled out her phone. She typed out a message to her parents and then put it away. All right, you're so eager, Himiko-chan. Izuku chuckled as he pulled out his own phone and sent a text to his parents. He simply told them that he and Toga were going to celebrate finishing the UA entrance exam. The two teens smiled as they left the campus and took a train to the closest entertainment district to the school. Halfway through the ride, Izuku received a reply from his parents. Both told him to have fun but to be back before dark. Come on, Izu-kun, Toga urged him as she pulled him along. Where are we going exactly, Himiko-chan? Izuku questioned with a laugh. Right here. Toga smiled as they entered a karaoke box. The guy behind the front desk smiled at the teens as they approached. What can I do for you? The man asked. We'd like to rent a box for an hour. Toga smiled back. All right, that'll be 1,000 yen. The man informed them. Toga went for her wallet but Izuku already had his out and handed the bill to the man. Izu. Toga pouted cutely. I want to. Izuku grinned at her. The man behind the desk chuckled at the cute couple. Box 9 is all yours, kids. Down the hall and take a right, it's the last door in the hall. The man informed as he handed them the room pass. Thank you, sir. Izuku smiled as he took the pass. The two made their way down the hall and into box 9. The room was spacious enough for upwards of 5 or 6 people. It had the standard karaoke equipment set up and ready. Toga closed the door to the box with a grin. All karaoke boxes are soundproof by design. They're made that way so that every box could have a group singing loudly in them and not bother each other. Now that they were alone in a soundproof room, well, singing was the last thing on Toga's mind. Izu. Toga breathed out as she wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her body against his back. Let's celebrate. She licked his ear and nibbled on it, making Izuku gasp. Hamiko. Izuku turned to face her and captured her lips. His girlfriend was heavily into physical affection and intimacy. In the year that they'd been dating, she was the one that set the pace for advances in their relationship. Izuku would put his foot down if she tried to go faster than he wanted, but so far that hadn't been a problem yet. The two separated their lips to breathe for a moment. Toga gently pushed Izuku onto the padded bench and straddled his lap. Their lips quickly found each other again and their kissing deepened. Tongues came into play and Toga moaned into their kiss. Izu-kun, Toga hummed when his hands cupped her bottom and began to massage and squeeze her cheeks. More, she questioned with a pant. Izuku, knowing and dating Toga for so long, knew what she was asking and nodded to her with a fond smile. With a happy giggle, Toga opened his uniform jacket and helped him shrug it off. His shirt came next, leaving his torso bare. She moaned approvingly as she ran her hands up and down his muscled chest. Cooing softly, she kissed his shoulder and then his neck. She licked the juncture between them before gently sinking her pronounced canines into his skin. Izuku let out a sound between a groan and a hiss, as he always did when he let Toga taste his blood. Toga was moaning softly into the bite as her tongue gently licked up the blood that flowed. Her fits had never gone away, but they were easily kept from being a factor in her life by Izuku's blood. A few drops and Toga didn't have to worry about anything for a few days. When they were intimate like this, Toga usually got enough to last for weeks on end. While she enjoyed his blood, Izuku would enjoy her amazing body. Toga moaned as she gently let go and began to lick the bite. Izuku's body enhancement quirk made him heal a bit faster than most. A bite like this one would only be a bruise in an hour or so. Less if he was under sunlight. Toga happily cleaned his wound until it had healed enough to stop bleeding. Izu-kun, Toga mumbled happily as she ground herself against the hardness she felt below her. Let me get this off. With that she pulled off her shirt and quickly undid her bra. Her s were exposed to Izuku's eyes for only a moment before he kissed both of her nipples and then ed the right one into his mouth. Toga's lewd moan was all Izuku needed to hear to know she was enjoying herself. So soft, Izuku mumbled into her s when he switched from her right to her left. Toga giggled as they continued to grind against each other. She pulled his head closer to her tit while running her fingers through his shaggy green hair. Izu-kun, let me do something too, Toga breathed hotly as she pulled away from him. Izuku could only stifle a loud groan as she descended his body. Kissing and licking wherever she felt like it, Toga eventually ended up kneeling on the carpeted floor between her boyfriend's legs. Smiling naughtily up at him with half-lidded eyes, Toga undid his pants. Izuku lifted his hips and she pulled them down so she could get at her target. Hamiko. Izuku rumbled in his throat and Toga shivered in pleasure just from the tone. She encircled his length with her fingers and stroked him gently. Breathing in the smell that belonged only to her, Izuku, the blonde panted before kissing the tip. With slow and teasing motions she left kisses up and down his shaft. When she got to the bottom, she stuck out her tongue and flattened it against him. Hearing him gasp, Toga slowly dragged her tongue from base to tip before kissing the head again. Her Izuku was big, not monstrous like she'd seen on the internet. Quirks could be all kinds, after all, but very much above average, and Toga had first-hand knowledge that it got bigger when fueled by his quirk. Ready, Izu? Toga breathed on the head. Yes, Izuku hissed out at the teasing. She giggled before lolling her tongue out and guiding his tip into her mouth. She shivered with pleasure as she gently ed him. Her eyes looked up and saw her powerful Izuku panting and groaning under her touch. It was such a pleasurable rush to know she had this much power over the strongest guy she knew. The fact that they were in love only amplified the feelings. She bobbed her head, taking in a bit more each time. Looking up again, their eyes met, dark green gazing into bright yellow with love and affection in both. Big boy, Toga giggled out as she pulled back to breathe. Her hands never stopped caressing and stroking. Himmy, Izuku exhaled in pleasure. You're really good at this. Toga smiled as she took him back into her mouth. They'd practiced a lot since they first took this step in their relationship. She wanted to be able to pleasure him like he pleasured her after all. Now if she could just get to the base again. With a bit of effort Toga had Izuku snugly buried in her throat and swallowed reflexively. Izuku's hands gently ran through her hair and undid her hair buns. Her long blonde locks fell down her back as Izuku ran his fingers through her hair. She pulled back so she could breathe before working her way back down again. They maintained eye contact, which just seemed to increase the intimacy and intensity of the act. Izuku was reduced to very little vocabulary beyond good and Himiko. Toga hummed the next time she took him into her throat. She knew just how to finish her Izuku off after all. The verdette's hands tightened in her hair, which made her tremble pleasantly as he came. Himiko. Izuku almost howled as he hit his peak. Feeling Toga swallow with him in her throat only made it that much more intense. For her part, the blonde adored swallowing his seed down. There was just something about it that was so naughty. She made sure to collect the last bit of his release on her tongue. Showing him her treat, she then gulped it down too. Izuku practically collapsed as he breathed deeply to slow down his heart rate again. "Did you like that, Izu-kun?" Toga playfully teased. She loved seeing the results of her efforts. She giggled loudly when Izuku's hands went under her arms and picked her up. She was quickly the one sitting on the padded bench. Her skirt was flipped up and her panties pulled down her legs and then off entirely. "Your turn, Himiko." Izuku looked her directly in the eye when he said that, and Toga shivered at the intensity in his eyes. Without another word Izuku was almost buried in her slick. She threaded her fingers through his wild green locks and moaned loudly. The best part of coming to a karaoke box was not having to worry about the noise. She could moan and scream her heart out in here while Izuku sent her to paradise. Yes, Toga moaned and would have thrashed if Izuku wasn't holding her legs down. She used her grip on his hair to push him closer to her needy lower lips. Gasps, pants, moans, and mewls were all Toga could articulate for the next minutes as Izuku's warm tongue worked her over, tracing her outer lips, then delving into her depths and making her buck into him. When he pulled back to focus his attention on her clit, she threw her head back and her jaw locked up while her eyes rolled back. She shook and trembled in her climax and pulled Izuku's hair as she thrashed in the throes of passion. We still have about 35 minutes left, Himiko-chan," Izuku informed the almost insensate teen. "Plenty of time to keep going," he declared with a chuckle. "Izu, do it," Toga panted as she reached between her legs to spread her lower lips for him. "Give it to me," Izuku smiled lovingly at the blonde before leaning forward and kissing her lips. The two shared a deep kiss before Izuku pulled back. Himiko blindly tried to chase his lips before she opened her eyes. "Our first time together will be in a proper bed, Himiko-chan," Izuku told his girlfriend. Himiko smiled at his thoughtfulness, but then pouted about not getting to have with her boyfriend. "I still have plenty of time to satisfy you though." With that Izuku buried himself between her thighs again and made her howl. "No, Izu, I'm still sensitive," Toga shrieked as Izuku went right back to making her moan and her eyes flutter. Her green-haired sun god would make her see paradise 5 more times before he stopped. Toga was in a daze as she and Izuku got dressed again. She almost put her shirt on backwards. She couldn't seem to figure out how to get her shoes back on after she'd kicked them off, and she was having a hell of a time getting her hair buns back up. She wouldn't trade this feeling for anything though. She loved it when Izuku doted on her in the bedroom, and she'd eventually figure out all the complicated parts of getting dressed again. "Let me help, Himi-chan." Izuku chuckled softly as he quickly gathered up her long blonde hair and helped her make the right side bun. The left followed, and by then she was clear-headed enough to put her shoes back on. The two left the karaoke box with no one any the wiser about what had occurred. Toga happily clung to Izuku's arm the whole way back to her house. The two shared a loving kiss before Izuku left to catch the train to his home. Midoriya apartment. "Did you have fun, Izuku?" Inko asked her son when he got home. "Yeah, Himiko-chan and I went to a karaoke box." Izuku told the truth to his mother. "That's nice, sweetie." Inko smiled warmly at him. "Dinner will be ready in a while. I'm making your favorite." "Thanks, Mom." Izuku smiled brightly at his mother. Inko beamed back at him and set about preparing the ingredients. Izuku smiled at his dad as he was about to head to his room. He stopped when his dad spoke up though. Izuku, did you get hurt at the exams? Hisashi questioned his son. No, I don't think I did. Izuku blinked. He hadn't been struck once by a single robot the whole time. You've got a bruise. Hisashi tapped at the left side of his own neck. Izuku's hand went up to the area. He knew what his father was talking about now. Himiko's bite had healed up by now. But he'd still have the bruise for another 30 minutes or so. He also knew exactly what it looked like. Well then, I'm glad to see you and Himiko had fun at karaoke. Hisashi smirked at his teen son. A knowing look was in his green eyes. Izuku felt his face heat up and looked down at the floor. His dad had seen the equivalent of a hickey on his neck from his girlfriend. This was super embarrassing. When his dad went so far as to give him a thumbs up, Izuku quickly retreated to his room. Hisashi chuckled as he turned towards the TV. His son was becoming a man. He and Toga-chan seemed to have progressed to second base. Maybe he'd run over to the Anmitsu place down the block and pick up a nice dessert for after dinner. It would be a subtle celebration for his son's relationship progress. Hisashi didn't know that he was a base short. If Izuku had his way, his father would never know that either. 1 week later, Midoriya home. Izuku, it's here, son, Hisashi exclaimed as he walked down the hall towards his son's room with the letter addressed to the teen. It was from UA and Hisashi had already decided it contained his son's acceptance letter. Thanks, Dad. Izuku thanked his father before taking the letter and heading for the living room. Let's open it together in the living room. The duo quickly entered the living room and sat down. Inko was quick to join them. Here it goes, he said as he opened the letter and out came a metallic disc. A hologram projector, Hisashi questioned before the disc lit up and a hologram appeared in their living room. Greetings, Midoriya Izuku. That's right, it's me, Nezu. Am I a dog, a mouse, or a bear? More importantly, I'm the principal. Nezu introduced himself cheerily, getting Izuku to grin. I'm happy to inform you that you passed the written exam with a very respectable 92%. Not the highest in the exam, but a very respectable score nonetheless. As for your practical exam score, please look behind me. The Chimera pointed to an electronic board that turned on, showing Izuku's picture and score. Practical exam score, Izuku Midoriya, villain points, 117. Rescue points, 55. Total, 172 points. Practical exam score. As you can see, you performed very well. The new record holder for highest score, in fact. Nezu congratulated with a smile on his face. I'm pleased to welcome you to UA High School, Midoriya-san. This will be your hero academia. That's my boy. Hisashi cheered as he playfully ruffled his son's hair. Oh, my baby boy. Inko happy cried as she hugged her son for all she was worth. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. I was certain I passed, but it feels great to hear it. Izuku smiled. Even though he'd reasoned that he'd passed, it was a completely different thing to get the confirmation. Also, record holder for highest score. Only to be expected for the future greatest hero. Izuku hugged his mother tightly while his father picked up his cell phone and declared that he was going to get them a reservation at a nice restaurant to celebrate tonight. Izuku was eventually able to get a moment to call Toga and hear her results. Hello, Izu-kun, you got your results too? Toga asked and Izuku confirmed it for her quickly. Yeah, Himi-chan, I took first place in the exam. The message also said I was the new record holder for highest score ever. Izuku grinned. He was proud of his accomplishment. That's really hot, Izu-kun. Maybe we should get together when your parents aren't home and celebrate properly. Toga tempted him with a throaty purr. Izuku felt himself shiver pleasantly from the tone. You're a minx, you know that. Izuku questioned his girlfriend. I try, Toga teased. Maybe we could make it work. Do you want to try this weekend? Izuku questioned with a grin. He knew to respond to Toga's teasing with his own. Otherwise his girlfriend would wield all the power in their relationship, and wouldn't that be boring? I will come over there and make you keep that promise, mister. Just keep going until one of us passes out, Toga moaned into the phone. Don't threaten me with a good time, Izuku retorted even as he felt a phantom bolt of pleasure run up his spine. Do your best, son. Hisashi smiled proudly at Izuku. Beside him Inko was holding back tears at watching their son head off for his first day at UA High School. Sure thing, Dad. Izuku smiled brightly at his parents as he headed out the door. Izuku hummed as he enjoyed the morning sunshine. He walked to the train station and boarded the correct line. After 2 stops, Toga joined him in her own UA uniform. Izuku smiled warmly at seeing Toga in the gray jacket and dark green skirt. Good morning, Izu-kun, Toga beamed at her boyfriend. The blonde's eyes roamed up and down her boyfriend, taking in how he looked in his uniform. She barely restrained from licking her lips at the sight. Izuku looked good in a uniform. Good morning, Himiko-chan. Izuku smiled warmly in return. Toga quickly sat beside him and leaned into her boyfriend. They entwined their fingers and enjoyed each other's closeness on the ride to their first day of high school. Both had been ecstatic to find out they'd be in the same class. If they hadn't, Toga would have raised hell. She'd have threatened one of the other students to switch with her at knife point if she had to. Hearing the automatic voice informing the passengers of the next stop, both Izuku and Toga stood up. They needed to get off here and then walk the remainder of the way to school. Honestly, in Toga's opinion, any extra time to walk hand in hand with Izuku was time well spent. Disembarking from the train and making their way out of the station, the couple took in the spring views and the pleasant morning. They both smiled reflexively as they walked through the large gates of the school. Both of them were proud of their accomplishment of being accepted by the #1 hero school in Japan. Toga felt an added sense of accomplishment on top of that. After all, her quirk had been called villainous or creepy more times than she could count. But now she was here, at UA High of all places. She was going to prove all of those people wrong. She'd be a hero, just like Izuku, and save people with her quirk. Ready, Himiko-chan? Izuku asked with a grin as they stood in front of the door to Class 1A. Always, Izu-kun, Toga chirped back as she stood on her toes to peck his cheek. Izuku placed a gentle kiss on her forehead in response, and Toga's smile could have lit up the hallway all by itself. Izuku opened the large door and both of their faces dropped. Izuku looked exasperated, while Toga looked like she wanted to slap somebody. Take your feet off that desk, immediately. The blue-haired teen from the entrance exam demanded as he chopped the air. It's an insult not only to the people that made it, but also to our seniors who studied here before us. You're kidding me, right? Bakugo sneered back at the other teen. Did your old school put a stick up your ass, or were you born with it? Should have known. Izuku sighed with a shake of his head. Why is he here? Toga grumbled, eyeing Bakugo like a pile of garbage. He shouldn't have even gotten in. Even if he did, they could have at least put him in a different class. It's him, the new record holder. The blue-haired teen blinked as he noticed Izuku and Toga standing in the doorway. Tisk. Bakugo scowled at Izuku from across the classroom. All of the other students in the classroom, the majority apparently as only a few seats were empty, looked towards him at the same time. Good morning. Izuku greeted the class as a whole. He was more than used to being looked at by people that knew the power of his quirk. Morning everyone. Toga smiled, mostly at the other girls in class, with a wave. Good morning. My name is Iida Tenya, from Somei Private Academy. Iida walked quickly towards the couple to introduce himself. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you. Izuku returned the greeting. Toga Himiko, are you going to get on Izuku's case again? Toga questioned, and Iida, clearly remembering the incident in question, shook his head in the negative. He'd been in exam site B and seen what Izuku was capable of after all. I was very impressed by your record-breaking achievement at the entrance exams, Midoriya. Iida congratulated Izuku. Thank you. Izuku nodded to the glasses-wearing teen. It was a good exam. It's not often I get to really use my quirk like that. He heard some comments from his new classmates when they heard Iida's mentioning of his record-breaking. So that's the guy that scored even higher than All Might back in the day. A spiky red-haired boy said to a blonde guy with a black, lightning bolt-like, streak in his hair. No way, for real? The blonde questioned, looking between Izuku and the redhead. Wasn't the old record like 150 or something? A pinkett girl questioned with a blink as she looked at Izuku. I saw the list for the entrance exam, he got 172 on it. A tall, brunette teen with a muscular frame spoke up. That's impressive, a boy with a bird-like head remarked. Damn Deku. Bakugo growled from his seat, still glaring at Izuku. Everyone's talking about you, Izu-kun, Toga giggled at her boyfriend. The pinkett girl sitting in the second seat perked up at the affectionate form of address. Did her new class already have a couple in it? She bounced a bit in her seat at the thought of getting to chat with the blonde girl. I'm used to it. Izuku smiled at her. If you're just here to chat you can pack up your stuff and leave. A male voice came from behind the couple. Turning to look, the duo found a man in a yellow sleeping bag lying on the floor. Neither was quite sure what to make of this new occurrence though. Who is this guy? Izuku wondered as he looked at the scruffy face poking out of the sleeping bag. Welcome to UA's hero course. The man spoke as he stood up and unzipped the sleeping bag. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's too long. Time is precious and rational students would understand that. Wait for me, please. A female voice called out and a brunette girl entered the class. Sorry, I almost got lost. You're technically not late yet. The scruffy man informed the girl with a sigh. Try to be more punctual from now on though. Yes, sir. The brunette bowed slightly as she headed back to her seat. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Aizawa informed the class. All of the students stared in shock at the information. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside. He pulled out a gym uniform from the sleeping bag and showed it to the class. Huh, every student blinked at the sudden instructions. In only a few minutes the class of 20 found themselves on a practice field. Thankfully, UA had pretty good signage to lead students to locker rooms and practice fields. So it was easy to find their way to them from the classroom. A quirk assessment test. All the students questioned when Aizawa informed them of what they'd be doing. But what about orientation? We're going to miss it. The brunette Ochako spoke up. If you want to be a pro you don't have time for pointless ceremonies. Aizawa replied. Here at UA we're not tethered to traditions. That means we get to run our classes however we see fit. With a quiet exhale, Aizawa held up a phone-like device. You've been taking standardized athletics tests your entire school lives, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks. The Ministry of Education is still trying to pretend we're all created equal and not letting those with the most power excel. It's not rational. One day they'll learn. With a shake of his head Aizawa focused on Izuku. Midoriya, you broke the record on the entrance exam. What was your best throw on the softball pitch in junior high? 68 meters, sir. Izuku replied. Right, try doing it with your quirk. Aizawa instructed and pointed to a circle on the ground. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. All right. Izuku looked at the ball in his hand. It was equal in both size and weight to a softball, but with a metallic black ring around the middle. With a thought Izuku bulked up. Heat began to emanate from his body as he used his quirk. A rather easy test for me, honestly. The verdette teen thought with a small smirk. So he's got a strength-enhancing quirk, huh? The red-haired boy Kirishima grinned as the class watched on. That's pretty manly. Oh, that's not even all of it. Toga giggled as she grinned at Izuku's towering form. What do you mean? Kirishima blinked as he turned to face the blonde girl. Oh, you'll see in just a second. Toga smiled like a cat that snatched the canary. Izuku, now standing at 2 meters in height, cocked his right arm back and focused his pyrokinetic ability through his body. The synergy of his hybrid quirk empowered him further and he focused on not destroying the ball. With a powerful throw the ball rocketed off into the distance. The simple throw had kicked up an impressive gust of wind and the students, barring Toga, all stared at the strength of their new classmate. A blast of fire went off in the distance and the students were confused. That was part of my throw, no cause for alarm. Izuku waved to his classmates to assure them. The teens' attention was only diverted a few moments later when Aizawa spoke up. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities, Aizawa stated as he turned to face the class as a whole. It's the most rational way to figure out your potential as a pro hero. He held up the device in his hand so that the students could see it. On the screen was Izuku's result of 5,346.1 meters. Izuku grinned as he listened to his classmates gasp at the distance. Over 5 kilometers, are you kidding me? The lightning bolt team Kaminari exclaimed in shock. What kind of quirk is that? A large boy with gray hair and a face mask questioned. That was awesome, Izu-kun. Toga cheered and all of the other girls in class looked at her. Some had blushes on their faces at the affectionate form of address. Others smiled at what was obviously a couple in their class. The pinkette with the pink skin practically had sparkles in her eyes. Not a bad throw, considering I had to hold back to not destroy the ball. Izuku chuckled and several of his classmates' jaws dropped. That was holding back. I wanna go, this looks fun. The pink girl clapped her hands together. This is what I'm talking about. Getting to use our quirks as much as we want. A black-haired boy cheered. So, this looks fun, huh? Aizawa questioned, quickly silencing the students. You have 3 years at UA to become a hero. Do you all think it's going to be all games and playtime? Seeing none of the students replying, Aizawa continued, Fools, today you'll engage in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last will be deemed to have none, and will be expelled immediately. That got a round of gasps from all of the students. Immediate expulsion for coming in last on these 8 tests. Izuku raised an eyebrow at Aizawa's words. That seems rather harsh, even for UA, to simply expel students so arbitrarily. As I said, we get to decide how our classes are run. If that's going to be a problem, you can head home right now. Aizawa stated as he pushed his long hair up out of his eyes and stared at his students. Now let the games begin. First test, 50-meter dash. Izuku watched as Iida and the verdette girl with the frog-like features took their places at the starting line. He was interested in seeing how his classmates did and what all of their quirks were. He already had his notebook out, which made Toga giggle at her quirk nerd of a boyfriend. Just at a glance he could tell that both Iida and the girl had mutant-type quirks. Their times were impressive though. Iida clocked in at just over 3 seconds and the girl at about 5.5 seconds. Watching his classmates run, and in some cases, use their quirks in interesting ways to complete the 50 meters, was letting Izuku fill his notebook pages quickly. Something the verdette teen was smiling about. Ochako finished in just over 7 seconds and seemed pleased with her result. Toga and the pink girl Mina both finished at just over 5 seconds. Mina appeared to be skating on something coming from her feet. Wondering what it was and what exactly her quirk was made the quirk enthusiast smile. When it was Izuku's turn he ended up being paired with Bakugo, much to his own resignation. You'll be eating my dust, Deku. Bakugo growled at him as they took starting position. Oh, Izuku arched an eyebrow at the ash blonde. If you want to be competitive then I'm all for it. With his body swelling in size and the heat that was generated because of it, Izuku took his stance. The bang of the camera robot's gun went off. With a burst of insane strength Izuku shattered the starting blocks. The now larger team cleared the 50 meters in only 3 strides. An impression of his foot was left anywhere he'd taken a step. He clocked in at 3 seconds flat. Bakugo was practically snarling when he'd finished a full 1.5 seconds later. The ash blonde's use of his explosions as thrusters hadn't meant anything to Izuku's speed. Grip strength test. If not for Izuku, Shoji Mezzo would have dominated this test with his 540 kg squeeze. But Izuku was nothing if not a powerhouse physically and maxed out the dynamometer with an insane 999 kg reading. Yaoyorozu Momo was the only one to match Izuku's feat when she made a miniature hydraulic clamp with her quirk and used it instead of her hands. Toga had come in with an impressive 45 kilograms. She was easily the strongest grip among the girls. Seated toe touch test. The seated toe touch test hadn't been challenging for Izuku. He was flexible and could get a good score on it easily. Mina was the overall winner on this test. The pink girl showed off some insane flexibility as she practically folded herself in half and was able to reach well past her feet with the tips of her fingers. Toga had placed second, almost able to match Mina in flexibility. The blonde and Pinkett seemed to be hitting it off rather well as they chatted between tests. Standing long jump test. The standing long jump was cleared easily by Izuku. His great strength saw him even outdoing Tsuyu and her frog quirk. When he added his pyrokinesis to the mix to act as jets, he became the clear winner as he landed well over 100 meters away. A giggling Toga had landed at the very end of the box and returned to her place by the time Izuku got back. Repeated side steps test. The repeated side steps were easy enough. With his enhanced physicality, Izuku secured second place. He'd left impressions of his shoes in the dirt when he finished. He was only beaten out by the short boy Mineta with the ball-like hair. The boy bounced between two cushions of his quirk at such speed that no one could keep up. Toga had ended up in 5th place on this test, though the blonde girl didn't mind. She was very much looking forward to the next test though. Sit-ups test. The sit-ups test was also conquered by Izuku without second place even being close. Toga had made sure she got to hold Izuku's feet. Once Izuku had finished the test, beating out the brunette boy Sato, Izuku became the immediate target of Mineta's envy. Toga had leaned forward on the last sit-up to peck Izuku's lips, which Izuku returned with a smile. The short teen had looked on with an incredibly desperate face, one that had gotten him some uneasy looks from those that saw it. Endurance running. Izuku and Iida eventually tied. Izuku had even struck up a conversation with Iida about the blue-haired teen's quirk as they ran around the track over and over again. Aizawa had eventually just told them to stop after they'd gone on for so long that they were cutting into the class's time to finish the last test. Softball pitch test. As Izuku had already done the softball pitch test, he didn't have to throw again. Instead, he was able to watch as his classmates came up with their own methods of getting farther throws, if their quirks were applicable to the test, of course. Bakugo raged when he'd gotten 705.4 meters and stewed angrily away from the rest of the class. Izuku had blinked in surprise when Momo had created a fully functional cannon of all things and fired the ball out of it. The vedette had been writing so fast Toga thought the paper might catch fire. The Ravenette's score of 3 kilometers and change was well earned in his opinion. Ochako left every student's jaw on the floor when she'd removed the effects of gravity from the ball and seemingly thrown it into orbit. Her reading came out as infinity, but Aizawa would only mark it as 1 meter further than Izuku's score. Needless to say, Izuku's notebook now had an entire page dedicated to both Ochako's and Momo's individual quirks. Toga had been giggling the whole way to the pitching circle. She narrowed her bright yellow eyes as she focused. With almost perfect form, she threw the ball as hard as she could. The ball went flying through the air and landed 60.2 meters away. That was great, Himiko-chan. Izuku pulled Toga into a warm hug. Toga happily snuggled into the embrace. They only separated at Aizawa's voice. I'm just going to bring up the whole list. It's not worth going over each individual score, Aizawa informed the class as he clicked the device in his hand. A hologram appeared and listed off their names from 1st to 20th place. Izuku chuckled as he saw his name sitting exactly where he expected it to be. Toga hugged his arm with muffled giggles of her own. Quirk assessment ranks. Midoriya Izuku, Yaoyorozu Momo, Todoroki Shoto, Bakugo Katsuki, Iida Tenya, Tokiyami Fumikage, Shoji Mezzo, Hiroshima Eijiro, Toga Himiko, Ashido Mina, Uraraka Ochako, Kota Koji, Sato Rikido, Asui Tsuyu, Aoyama Yuga, Shiro Honta, Kaminari Denki, Jiro Kyoka, Hagakure Toru, Mineta Minoru. Quirk assessment ranks. That's to be expected of my Izu-kun, Toga giggled as she leaned into her boyfriend. You're in the top 10 yourself, Himiko-chan. Izuku praised her, making Toga smile brightly at him. No, Mineta screamed as he looked at the list. How am I going to get popular with the ladies if I get expelled? His exclamation brought some, rather obvious, reactions from his classmates. Dude, really? Hiroshima looked at Mineta disappointedly. So unmanly. Pervert. Momo looked away from the short boy. Wow, The perplexed with the earphone jacks Jiro Kyoka drawled. The girl was clearly unimpressed to say the least. Mineta, that is not how a UA student should behave. Much less someone who wishes to become a hero. Iida chopped the air repeatedly as he admonished the shorter teen. Gross. Toga made a face as she snuggled closer to Izuku. Also, I lied about expelling the person in last place. Aizawa informed them with a wave of his hand. It was a logical ruse to make you all try your hardest. I'm saved. Mineta cheered only to be wrapped up in Aizawa's scarves and dragged in front of the teacher. Aizawa's eyes glowed red with his quirk as he held Mineta off the ground at eye level. That being said, if you don't improve both your behavior and your physical scores, you'll be out of here before you know it. Aizawa informed the, once again, panicking boy. Just because you're not going home today doesn't mean you aren't the first one on the chopping block. Do you understand? Mineta nodded rapidly before being released by Aizawa's scarves and dropping to the ground. The teacher then turned to Toru. The physical score increase applies to you as well, Hagakure, understand? Yes, sir, Toru replied, standing stiffly as if she was at attention. Your quirks have their uses, but a hero can't just coast by on their quirk alone. Aizawa stated to the two lowest scorers. UA has plenty of gym and track facilities for students to make use of. If you're really serious about staying here, I'd suggest using them regularly. Yes, sensei. Toru agreed immediately. Yes, sir. Mineta nodded back, though far less enthusiastically. Anyway, your papers for the school and the beginning of the semester are on your desks. Make sure you pick them up and read them by tomorrow. Dismissed. Aizawa informed the class as he walked away. The teens slowly made their way back to the locker rooms to change. Girls' locker room. Didn't expect this on our first day. Toru exhaled heavily as the girls all changed back into their school uniforms. It was definitely different, Mina replied with an encouraging smile. Rather unexpected. Momo agreed as she buttoned up her shirt. I hope everything we missed in orientation is covered in the papers Aizawa told us to pick up from the classroom. Ochako fretted as she pulled on her skirt. I'm sure it'll be fine. Toga giggled as she smiled at the other girls. That reminds me, Mina looked at Toga with a grin. You and Midoriya are a couple, right? Yep. Toga popped the P with a bright grin of her own. He's my Izu-kun. You two look cute together. Suyu complimented the blonde with a cute little croak. Thank you, Su-chan. Toga laughed happily. Momo, Kyoka, and Ochako blushed at the current topic while Toru and Mina giggled. So, how long have you two been together? Mina asked with bright, almost sparkling, eyes. Me and Izu started dating near the end of second year in junior high. Toga held her cheek with a soft smile. He confessed to me with a letter and everything. Ah, that's so sweet. Ochako gushed, even her normally rosy cheeks were redder than normal. It's very cute, Momo agreed as she finished with her tie. The Ravenette's cheeks were giving Ochako's a run for their money. So Midoriya is the romantic type, huh? Mina giggled. A big strong guy with a heart of gold. Toru giggled as she put on her shoes. Can we please talk about something else? Kyoka requested as she closed the locker and revealed her blushing face. Izu-kun is strong, for sure, Toga smiled at what were fast becoming her first female friends since elementary school. Even without his quirk bulking him up, she teased as she pulled out her phone. She unlocked it and then flipped through her pictures. With a giggle she turned the screen to face her classmates. Oh my, Mina and Toru both broke into giggles with bright cheeks. On the screen was a picture of Izuku, shirtless and wearing a pair of swim trunks, his muscled body on display to the girls' eyes. Chi Toga-san. Momo covered her eyes, after she'd spent several seconds looking. Midoriya-chan is ripped, Suyu commented, her own cheeks a healthy red. Are you sure you should be showing us this? Kyoka questioned the blonde girl. Her cheeks might very well be the brightest. She was also the second, after Momo, to avert her eyes. It's fine. Toga waved off. Izu-kun and I were on the beach when I took this pic. He's not body shy at all. We talked about sharing photos with others before. He doesn't share any pics I send, just for him, and I don't share anything that is, just for me, either. J just F for YU. Ochako's head might have actually been steaming. We each have a few, Toga teased with a wink and giggled at the flushed faces of her new friends. We should be hurrying. We need to get our papers and stuff from class still, Suyu commented as she headed for the door, already changed and with her cheeks slowly cooling off. What? No way. I wanna keep talking about boys and romance. Mina playfully whined as she followed after the frog-like girl. Also see if Toga-chan has any more pics she wants to share. Toga couldn't help but giggle at Mina, the pinkett giving her a wink to let the other girl know that she was kidding. I'm sure there will be time for such things later, Momo spoke, even with bright red cheeks, while the girls exited the locker room. For now we should focus on the work we have ahead of us. Alright, save it for girl talk later then. Mina smiled widely. I'm in, Toru exclaimed as she fell into step with Mina. We could make a group chat for the girls of 1A. Toga suggested with a smile. I'm not well versed in such things, Momo admitted. Her upbringing didn't give her very many opportunities to make friends. We'll get you there, Yaomomo. Mina grinned at the Ravenet. Yaomomo. Momo blinked as she raised her hands to her cheeks cutely. We're not only going to talk about Toga-chan's relationship, are we? Kyoka raised an eyebrow. I doubt it. Ochako chuckled as the girls pulled out their phones to exchange numbers. Izuku had no idea that Toga was quickly making new friends, but would be ecstatic when she told him on their way back home. He'd never mention it aloud, but he was worried Toga didn't have any female friends. To be fair, Izuku didn't exactly have any male or female friends of his own. Most were either intimidated when they saw what he could do, or thought his muttering and hobby of quirk analysis was weird. Midoriya, bro, you kicked ass today. Hiroshima smiled at the verdette. Thanks, Hiroshima. Izuku grinned at the redhead. You did great too. Thanks man, but you're definitely the MVP today. Hiroshima chuckled. I'll say, you demolished the tests, man. Kaminari laughed. No one was even close on some of them. So what's up with your quirk? Sato asked as the boys started to finish changing. I thought it was sort of similar to mine, being a strength enhancer, but that fire kinda disagrees. Well, my quirk is a type hybrid. Izuku smiled as he started to explain his quirk to his classmates. Maybe Toga wasn't the only one that would have some new friends by the end of the day. That's all anyone could call the first half of UA high school's day. Completely normal subjects, like math, English, classical Japanese, were taught as if they were at a normal high school. The only difference was that they were taught by pro heroes for these mundane subjects. Pro heroes like Ectoplasm teaching mathematics, or Present Mike teaching English. It was the epitome of normal for a school barring that one difference. When the lunch bell rang, the whole of 1A made their way towards the cafeteria. The reactions to the first half of their classes were varied. Some, like Mina, Kaminari, Shiro, and Toru looked wiped out. While others, including Momo, Iida, Bakugo, and Izuku weren't bothered by the lessons much. This food makes morning classes all better. Mina smiled happily as she ate. It's good, Toga agreed with a smile as she sat next to Izuku. Not as full of love as Mama Inko's cooking though. I doubt anyone can put that much love in their cooking, Hamiko-chan. Izuku chuckled as he ate. Inko had burst into a fountain of tears the first time Toga had called her Mama Inko. The blonde was nearly crushed by the hug she'd been wrapped in by the emotional verdette woman. Izuku still got a chuckle out of it to this day. Both Inko and Hisashi were in favor of Izuku and Hamiko eventually marrying in the future. Likewise, Toga's parents were all for the idea, considering Izuku was the one helping their daughter be normal. Honestly, Izuku didn't like how much emphasis Toga's parents put on being normal and fitting in. They had practically smothered their daughter with such expectations after all. He hated to think what might have happened if he and Toga hadn't met back in junior high. You two are so adorable, Toru cooed at the couple. Toga beamed at her new friend and Izuku smiled at the invisible girl. What do you think our first heroics class is going to entail? Hiroshima asked from the other side of the table. The redhead was munching on his food with a curious look around the table. I'd guess introductory things, maybe some basic training. Momo surmised as she had a thoughtful look. Basic training seems likely. Suyu placed her index finger on her cheek. I hope it's not another pass or be expelled thing. Sato shook his head. Aizawa scared the heck out of me with that. No kidding. Jiro shivered slightly. When he said that, I almost panicked. Ochako nodded to the perplet with her mouth full. Toga thought she looked cute scarfing down her rice like that. We just have to do our best. Mina raised her fist into the air with a bright grin. Indeed, Iida nodded to the Pinkett. We shall give our all to become great heroes in the future. If it wasn't for the fact that he had utensils in his hands, Izuku felt like Iida would be chopping the air to accompany his statement. After lunch, Class 1A was sitting at their desks waiting for their teacher to arrive. The first heroics class had many of them hyped up. This was what all the work to get into UA was about. Training to become heroes. All 20 students perked up when a very familiar laugh sounded out. I am here, the boisterous voice called out. Coming through the door like a normal person. All Might threw open the door to Class 1A, he held onto the frame as he leaned into the classroom. The students erupted into cries of shock and excitement. Holy crap, Kaminari shouted. It's really All Might. Hiroshima cheered with his fists raised. All Might is our teacher. Izuku was smiling widely and Toga was smothering her giggles. All Might had always been Izuku's favorite hero. Getting to see the man up close, talk to him, and learn from the number one was a dream come true for her boyfriend. He also looked cute with sparkles practically coming from his eyes. All Might made his way to the podium and put his fists on his hips, his trademark smile practically shining at the teens. I will be teaching foundational heroics. In this class, we will be pushing all of you to your limits so that you can learn the basics of being a hero. We'll be here after lunch every day, sometimes only with me, while other times we'll have another of your teachers assisting. This class also has the most units per semester. So slacking off we'll see you quickly losing your spot in the hero course. The number one hero warned the class. The blonde man held a card in his hand. With that said, let's get right into it. Your first class shall be combat training. The card he was holding did indeed have the word battle written on it. Combat. Bakugo was grinning viciously. He was beyond excited. The scores from yesterday's assessment wouldn't mean a thing once he aced this class. For this class you'll need these. All Might clicked a button and several panels popped out of the wall on the far side of the room. Each of them had 5 metal cases labeled from 1 to 20, matching the students' seating numbers. In accordance with your quirk registries as well as your own written requests, these are your. The number one didn't even get to finish as he was drowned out by the students. Costumes. The class shouted in glee. All of them were practically shaking with excitement. This was the real deal. They'd finally get to wear the costumes they'd come up with. That's right, All Might yelled smiling at them all. After you change, meet at Ground Alpha. Ground Alpha. All Might stood on Ground Alpha, fists again on his hips as he waited for his students to start coming out of the tunnel and into Ground Alpha proper. His grin widened as he saw the first of them walk into the light. They say the costume makes the hero, young students. The number one hero looked over each of them and noted what he saw of the costumes. Young Hagakure looked like she needed some instruction. The teen was clearly not wearing anything beyond a pair of gloves and sneakers. He'd have to discuss this with his colleagues. Surely, they could help the invisible teen get a real costume. Mimetic polymers and other materials that incorporated a person's own hair or cells into their costume had come a long way from when he debuted as a hero. Surely something of that nature could be applied to Hagakure. Be proud. From this moment on, you are heroes. All Might leaned forward with his trademark smile. Shall we begin, you bunch of newbies? Your costume is great, Ochako. Toga complimented her new friend as they waited for All Might to grab a box he had next to his feet. I like yours too, Toga. Ochako smiled as she looked over her friend's hero costume. It was styled after a typical school sailor uniform, but even to the brunette's eyes she could tell the fabric was padded and reinforced for protection. Is that Kevlar? Yep, Izu-kun helped me design it. It'll stop most bullets and it's knife-proof. Toga smiled as she did a small twirl to show the whole costume off. What I'm really happy about is this. She smiled as she pulled the collar down to reveal part of the sports bra underneath. Izu-kun helped me find out about quirk-compatible fibers online and I submitted some of my hair for testing. It worked out in my case. The sports bra and spats I'm wearing under my costume are almost completely made of my own hair blended with synthetic, mimetic fibers. They'll stay on and keep me from being naked when I deactivate my quirk. No more embarrassing naked moments for me. That's great. Ochako smiled, even though her cheeks were just a bit redder than usual. Toga had told the other girls about her quirks problem in their group chat. Quirks were one of the first things the girls had talked about after all. I'm glad you don't have to deal with that anymore. Me too. Toga giggled. It was just out of the corner of her eye that she noticed him, Mineta, the creepy pervert in their class. He had apparently slunk over towards her and Ochako while they were talking and his eyes hadn't left her chest, probably since she'd shown Ochako the portion of her sports bra. All of the girls in their class watched as the creep, accidentally, tripped, on flat ground, and fell towards Toga's exposed legs. Said blonde didn't have time to try and move away and all of the other girls already felt bad that she was going to be touched by the little pervert. Mineta was stopped from falling by a booted foot. Looking up the leg the foot was attached to, Mineta locked eyes with Izuku. The verdette didn't look amused. Since Mineta was resting on his boot, Izuku simply high-kicked, and launched the pervert high into the air. Mineta's screams of terror as he rocketed into the air drew All Might's attention. The number one hero blinked as he looked between Toga, Izuku, Ochako, and then the rapidly disappearing Mineta. You okay, Himiko? Izuku asked his girlfriend. Toga smiled happily before hugging him. Yep, Toga smiled while popping the P. You always save me when I need you. She giggled while snuggling into his chest. Holy shit, Kaminari exclaimed as he lost sight of Mineta in the sky. I think he just yeeted Mineta into the stratosphere. Good, every girl in Class 1A stated flatly, their faces all deadpan. It spoke volumes that in only a single day, none of the girls thought Izuku had gone overboard with Mineta. The short teen's perverted nature had made him no friends amongst the girls of his class. Definitely going to have a talk with young Mineta. All Might thought to himself as he looked into the sky to find the boy. Spotting the teen in the sky, the symbol of peace leapt into the air. All Might met Mineta before the grape-themed teen could begin his descent. Grabbing the student by the back of his costume, All Might slowed their fall with a few well-placed stomps against the air. His immense strength created blasts of wind with each kick and the duo landed a bit away from the rest of the students. Setting the teen down All Might's side, it looked like he'd need to enlist Aizawa's help to set young Mineta straight about his behavior. No more of that, young Mineta. All Might warned the teen. Mineta, still shaking from his impromptu flight, nodded rapidly. Young Midoriya, refrain from putting your classmates in life-threatening situations. This is your one and only warning, am I clear? Yes, All Might, I got a bit carried away, my apologies. Izuku bowed his head. Toga hugged him tighter. If anyone could see her face though, they'd probably be shocked by the vicious grin on her lips. Knowing that Izuku was willing to protect her like that was heartwarming. But it also fanned the flames of her more aggressive tendencies too. Hopefully whatever they were doing today would help her calm down a bit. If not, well, Izuku could help her out after class. The blonde stifled a giggle at her own naughty thoughts. Your costume came out great, Izu-kun. Toga complimented her boyfriend with a bright smile. Izuku's costume consisted of a large, dark green vest, padded with Kevlar, and matching pants. A belt with a large golden buckle in the shape of a lion's head secured his pants. On his feet were brown boots and on his back was his only support gear. A large, modified fireman's axe hung from a special belt holster across Izuku's back. Aside from the golden color, it looked normal enough, at first glance, but it clearly had some extra features built in. The most notable being what looked like Vent's Wehrhaft head. Many of the students were curious about what the large axe could do. Now, without any more interruptions, All Might looked over Mineta, Izuku, and then the rest of Class 1A. Let's begin. Sensei. Ida's hand shot into the air. All Might gave the teen a nod and Iida spoke. This appears to be a wide-open plain. What kind of combat training are we doing here? Excellent question, young Iida. All Might pointed at the teen in his white, armor-like costume. Today we'll be getting a baseline of your combat abilities by having you go toe-to-toe with each other. This will let me see where you stand now, as well as how you use your quirks. How will matches be chosen? Momo asked with her hand raised. Is there a time limit? Hiroshima questioned next. How bad can we rough up our opponent? Bakugo yelled over the others. Hold on, hold on. All Might held up his hands. My quirk isn't super hearing, you know. He shook himself before regaining his composure. We'll be randomizing the matches by drawing lots. Heroes don't get to choose what villains they'll have to confront in the field. This randomization will help simulate that. With that, All Might called each student up by their seat number and had them draw a lot from the box in his hands. Toga, seat number 13, pulled out a lot that had the letter H on it. Looking around, she wondered which of her classmates had the other H lot. Let's see, Izuku mumbled as he reached into the box. As seat number 18, there weren't many lots left for him to pick. Huh, first again it looks like. He chuckled as he glanced at the large A on his lot. Damn it, Bakugo growled as he noticed that Izuku's lot didn't match with his. All Might had to stoop down to let Mineta pick his lot. The relieved sigh the short teen gave off must have meant he didn't get anyone he was immediately terrified of. Momo picked hers next and looked over her classmates. It seemed that Shoji, the tallest guy in their class, would be her opponent. Last was Todoroki, who picked out the final lot. Izuku raised an eyebrow when the teen with the two-toned hair turned to face him. The other A lot in his hand explained why though. All right then, All Might spoke loudly. Does everyone have their opponent? Getting nods from all of the students made the blonde man smile. Good, then we'll start with the first match. Lot A, you're up. Both Todoroki and Izuku made their way out to the middle of the large, flat field. Fairly simple rules, young Todoroki. Young Midoriya, absolutely no lethal force, no harming any of your waiting classmates, and if I declare the match over, it is over. Are we clear? Yes, sensei. Izuku nodded to his idol. Yes, sir, Todoroki stated, his eyes not leaving Izuku. Good, when I say, start, you may begin. All Might instructed, but he stopped when Izuku held up his hand. Yes, young Midoriya. Could you hold on to this for me, sensei? Izuku asked as he removed his support gear axe from his back. All Might nodded in agreement and took the golden axe from the verdette. Todoroki's eyes widened, the first real emotion the teen had shown in the last 2 days, as All Might's arm dropped slightly when the axe fell into his hand. Oof, it's heavier than it looks. All Might chuckled as he hefted the axe over his right shoulder. Now that he'd gotten a feel for the weight, he wielded it like a child held an empty paper towel tube. Thank you, sensei. Izuku nodded to the man. Of course, All Might waved off. Ready, start. With a leap backwards, All Might was standing next to the rest of Class 1A. Are you sure you don't need your support gear? Todoroki asked flatly. Not for this. Izuku shook his head as heat began to radiate from him and he grew and bulked up. Todoroki's left eye, the one with the burn scar, twitched as he felt the heat. It wouldn't make a difference either way, Todoroki stated as he raised his right hand. You've yet to even face me in this state, Izuku chuckled with amusement seeping into his voice. Yet you already declare your victory regardless. Confident, aren't you? Todoroki's response was to send a wave of ice and frost across the majority of the field. Everything on Izuku's side was encased in the ice near instantly. I told you, Todoroki sighed. White mist escaped the teen's mouth from the newfound chill in the air. That was insane. Kaminari blinked as he watched Todoroki freeze half the field and Izuku along with it. He won instantly. He hasn't won anything. Toga giggled and everyone, including All Might, looked at the girl confused. Izuku hasn't even tried yet. Boom. A blast shook the field as all of Todoroki's ice shattered into a steam burst from the rapid shift in temperature. The heterochromatic student was sent flying backwards from the shockwave and barely stayed upright. Standing exactly where he'd been frozen was the, now towering, form of Izuku. Heat haze was rolling off his body as all the ice disappeared. How did you do that? Todoroki looked even more shocked than the rest of the class. Your quirk is interesting, but it's not nearly cold enough to do me any harm. Izuku chuckled. Come, let's continue the match. Todoroki narrowed his eyes as he sent an even larger wave of ice at Izuku. Much to his shock, the verdette practically exploded into flames. The wave of ice was met with an intense blast of fire. The conflicting temperatures caused another thermal shockwave that sent Todoroki stumbling. Izuku didn't even flinch from the blast. It seems I'll have to get serious, Todoroki stated coldly as frost began to form along his right arm. What came next stunned the entire class. Even All Might had to crane his neck to look up in amazement. A Ing glacier now existed on ground Alpha. The massive amount of ice completely covered the field, except the area where Todoroki was standing, and it was only a dozen meters or so away from the rest of the class. Many of the girls, thanks to their skin-tight costumes, or lack of clothing in Toru's case, shivered at the sudden drop in temperature. IIITTH think T to Todoroki W wins and now. Zero chattered out as he wrapped his arms around his body from the cold. I prefer heat to cold. Toga grumbled as she shivered. I hope Izu-kun fixes this soon. All of her classmates looked at her like she was crazy. Did she not see the glacier in front of them? Hugh dropped jaws as the glacier began to steam and rapidly melt. Ha 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 ha. Izuku chuckled loudly as the glacier melted around him. The streams of water pouring off the rapidly melting ice also turning to steam from the heat he was radiating out as fire surrounded him. To think I'd find such a strong person amongst my classmates. Your quirk is very impressive, Todoroki. He praised his classmate. Todoroki looked thunderstruck at Izuku's ability to shrug off his most powerful attack. Izuku glanced over Todoroki's shivering body. Half of the teen appeared to be covered in frost. It almost matched the left side of his costume with the ice covering it. You seem cold, Todoroki. Don't worry about it. Todoroki exhaled frosted breath as he tried to stop his shivering. Nonsense. Izuku grinned at the other teen. Let me help you warm up. The verdette raised his left hand into the air and everyone watched while holding their breath. Toga being the only exception, she grinned widely at what was about to happen. Midday sun. Izuku intoned, and about 30 meters directly above him a second sun seemingly swirled into existence. The heat wave this released blew through ground Alpha and wiped any remaining traces of cold away. The new sun hung in the air without moving. Many of the teens wondered if Izuku was going to throw it at Todoroki in retaliation for the earlier glacier. So, is he going to attack with that or what? Kaminari blinked as the mini-sun continued to stay motionless. Only the flares of fire that occasionally escaped the massive sphere were moving at all. Nope. Toga grinned as she removed the Kevlar-padded sweater portion of her costume. The cotton and carbon nanofiber blend of her Sailor Fuku-inspired top revealed. That's an AoE move. If you can remove any layers, I'd recommend it. It's going to get really hot the longer Izu-kun keeps that up. She's right, Momo confirmed as she'd already made a digital thermometer with her quirk. The temperature is steadily rising even at our distance. I can't imagine the level of heat those two are experiencing standing directly under that micro-sun. Well, are you warmer now, Todoroki? Izuku questioned his opponent as massive heat haze almost obscured their view of each other. How are you doing this? Todoroki panted as he was focusing on keeping his body cool with his ice. The left side of his costume was already a lost cause. It had melted away in a matter of moments. How can you maintain this level of pyrokinesis? You shouldn't be able to even speak. All of your focus should be on maintaining that fire. I've trained long and hard with my quirk, Izuku informed the other teen. My heat resistance was incredibly high from birth. Through hard work over the last almost decade, I've refined my abilities and increased my natural resistance. This is nothing for me now. Impossible. Todoroki trailed off as Izuku moved and was suddenly in front of him. The verdette's fist was cocked back and Todoroki instinctively threw up a wall of ice to block. The only problem was his wall of ice was more like a wall of slush. The intense heat radiating down on them from Izuku's midday sun was partially nullifying his quirk. The large fist passed through the slush and nailed Todoroki in the chest. The heterochromatic teen was knocked off his feet and sent rolling backwards. The longer this fight lasts, the hotter my son gets. Izuku informed his opponent. If it wasn't for your quirk, you'd probably already have blistered skin and be suffering from heat exhaustion. Shut up, Todoroki panted as he forced his quirk to work. A wave of ice and slush swamped Izuku. Todoroki continued to force his quirk as he sent wave after wave of ice and slush at Izuku. The only problem with this strategy was that Todoroki was barely even cooling himself down at this point. The air was so hot they might as well have been standing in a blast furnace. A second problem with his strategy came in the form of Izuku passing through his attacks like they were merely a light mist and socking Todoroki in the jaw. The red, white-haired teen felt his feet come off the ground. His vision developed spots of black as he hit the hot dirt of ground alpha. His head was swimming and he couldn't focus. The last thing he saw with his blurring vision was the bright orange-yellow glow of Midoriya's sun disappearing and the teen standing over him. With Class 1A in all might. Hot, Mina cried out as the temperature continued to increase. All of the students that had a layer to remove had already done so. Mina had ditched her vest with the faux fur neck lining. Kaminari had shucked off his jacket, as had Jiro with hers. This is insane. Momo shook her head in disbelief at the number on her digital thermometer. The day had been a pleasant spring day when they'd come out to ground alpha, roughly 21 degrees Celsius. According to her thermometer it was now 36 degrees Celsius and still climbing. I told you, Toga sighed as she fanned herself as much as possible. It's got to feel like hell where they are. Tokiyami commented, having also removed his long cloak a while back. Shouldn't we stop them? Suyu questioned as she wiped her forehead of sweat. The mini-sun dispersing a few seconds later answered the frog-like girl's question. They all watched as Izuku stood over the downed Todoroki. With the disappearance of the sun, all of the students let out sighs of relief when a cool breeze blew through ground alpha. The heat was dispersing and the temperature in the area was dropping back to what it had been. Midoriya is the winner, All Might announced loudly. He rushed onto the field and was at the two teens' side a moment later. I knocked him out, but I don't think I hurt him much beyond that. Izuku informed his idol teacher. His heat resistance is impressive. Yes, he appears to be all right, but just in case. All Might pulled out a small phone-like device and hit a button. Less than a minute later two robots rolled onto the field with a stretcher between them. They carefully loaded Todoroki onto it before picking it back up and rolling away. Those medic units will take young Todoroki to Recovery Girl for treatment. He'll be fine in short order with her care. UA is impressive. Izuku blinked as he saw both the care and efficiency the small robots had used to get Todoroki to the care of Recovery Girl. No wonder they can train in as close to real-life situations as they do. Quite right, young Midoriya. All Might smiled and gave him thumbs up. Izuku was still bulked up by his quirk, so he had no desire to fanboy squeal. Once he cooled off, then he'd do so. Toga would probably get a giggle out of it, Izuku thought with a grin. The teacher and student walked back to the rest of the class. All Might handed Izuku his support gear axe back and the Verdette teen casually returned it to the special holster on his back. Alright, so next we have Lot B, let's see what you've got. All Might declared as he moved the class forward. That was great, Izu-kun. Toga smiled brightly at him. Izuku shrank down as he released his quirk and smiled back at his girlfriend. Thanks, Himiko-chan. Izuku pulled her into a hug and the two squeezed each other gently. It got pretty hot over here, Toga grinned up at him. I don't think they believed me when I told them it was about to get really hot. Ah, sorry about that. Izuku apologized with a grin. I got all sweaty because of you, Toga fake pouted at him, puffing her cheeks up cutely. You'll have to make it up to me. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. You want to stop by that crepe place we saw yesterday, don't you? Izuku raised an eyebrow at his girlfriend. Maybe. Toga grinned at him. You could just ask. Izuku chuckled as he kissed her cheek. Toga beamed at him as she held the spot his lips had just left. "What am I going to do with you?" He shook his head fondly at her. "I could think of a few things." Toga winked at him with a naughty grin. "Not in front of everyone, Himiko-chan." Izuku reminded his amorous girlfriend. "Boo." Toga playfully stuck out her tongue. Toga smiled as she and Izuku held hands while they watched their classmates spar with each other. So far no one had even come close to matching what Izuku and Todoroki had done in the first match. Some of the other matches had been quick, while others had dragged out a bit. Match B had been Iida vs Aoyama. The blonde teen had fired his laser at the speedster multiple times, but not a single blast had touched Iida. The match ended with a punishing, high-speed kick from Iida that folded Aoyama over his leg. Iida had apologized profusely to the almost unconscious blonde when All Might had called in the medic units to take Aoyama to Recovery Girl. Match C had dragged on for a while. Hiroshima vs Bakugo had seen the screaming bomber actually meet someone that could stand up to his explosion quirk. Hiroshima had managed to sock Bakugo in the jaw one good time by punching through the smoke the explosion caused. This led to a back-and-forth match of offense versus defense. Bakugo had more raw power and better mobility, but Hiroshima's quirk was so tough it mostly negated Bakugo's force. Toga giggled every time Izuku pulled out his notebook to jot down new observations about his classmates' quirks. Match D was short and sweet. Kaminari vs Kota had ended with the larger team twitching on the ground. Though it was obvious Kota had never been in a fight a day in his life. The large teen was rather pacifistic and had no real form. Kaminari had ducked a couple of wild punches then touched Kota. The teen had twitched and let out a shriek from the voltage passing through him before collapsing. Match E had been Zero vs Mina, two mid to long range fighters. Mina had displayed an incredible level of acrobatics and flexibility dodging Zero's tape. The black-haired boy also had pretty good evasion, quickly dodging every blob of acid Mina chucked at him. At the end of the several-minute-long bout, Mina had managed to pull the win by striking Zero's elbows with her acid. The fact that both teens were breathing heavily from all the running and evading showed just how hard it had been for them. Zero had been all right after a few moments of wiping the acidic substance of his skin, with Mina's help. Match F had been Mineta vs Tokiyami. The short teen hadn't seemed perturbed by their bird-headed classmate when he'd matched lots with him. That quickly changed when, just a second after the match started, a shadowy beast had emerged from under Tokiyami's cloak and blitzed Mineta. A large, clawed hand slammed the purple-headed boy into the ground and held him completely immobile. After 30 seconds, All Might had called the match in Tokiyami's favor. Toga had stifled herself as she'd broken into full-on laughter at how fast Izuku was writing down Tokiyami's quirk. Match G had been Momo vs Shoji. The large teen proved his own impressive strength by snapping the first bolo-like restraints Momo had used on him. The voluptuous teen had to make a quick retreat when Shoji rushed her. The masked teen's multiple fists had left an imprint in the ground when he'd missed a strike only he could pull off. During her retreat Momo's stomach had glowed and a wave of caltrops had fallen onto the dirt between her and Shoji. The tall teen had staggered as he forced himself to stop his charge and avoid stepping on the sharp implements. With some time to think, Momo had created a few items quickly. The Ravenette had barely had time to finish her creations by the time Shoji had rushed around her caltrops and was on her again. Momo dodged the multiple limbs Shoji struck at her with before slamming two of her creations on the ground. A huge blast of smoke obscured everyone's vision as what were apparently smoke bombs went off. They all heard a cry of surprised pain before Momo staggered out of the smoke cradling her right arm. Already a large bruise was forming on the limb. Shoji strode out of the smoke with multiple large ears at the end of his dupli arm's quirk. "You heard me," Momo stated and Shoji nodded as the ears reformed into fists. The silver-haired teen moved forward to continue the match, but he took a taser shot to the chest for his trouble. As Shoji collapsed to the ground, his body twitching, Momo revealed the final object she'd made to be a police-style taser gun. All Might called the match in Momo's victory and the two combatants left the field. Shoji stating he was fine as he gently rubbed the area the nodes had struck him. Match H was Toga's and she was going up against Sato, one of the largest guys in their class. The two made their way out onto the field together and Sato, in his yellow costume, gave her a nod. Toga grinned at the larger teen and All Might began the match. Sato grabbed a container and dumped the contents in his mouth. Toga observed carefully to discern what his quirk was. A habit she'd picked up from Izuku instead of rushing in to try and attack first. Sato's muscles began to expand and bulk up, the yellow costume getting tighter over his frame as he obviously increased his strength. It was sort of similar to Izuku's quirk, but Toga had a feeling the strength increase was nowhere near as much as her boyfriend's. Sato rushed forward, fist cocked back for a devastating punch, and Toga pivoted on her heel to dodge the blow. With her opponent slightly off balance, Toga kicked his ankle hard. Sato went down and collided with the dirt. Toga pulled her knives and leapt onto his back. Sato started to struggle, until he felt the metal near his neck. The brunette teen broke out into a sweat at the knives held to his throat. When Toga giggled at his face, Sato was reminded of a slasher film he'd seen once. Midoriya's girlfriend was freaking scary when she wanted to be. "I think I win, yeah?" Toga asked rhetorically, the knives held stable, not touching him, but also not giving Sato any room to retaliate. "Why yeah, good match." Sato agreed and Toga removed her knives and hopped off of his back. With a smile she resheathed her blades. Sato got off the ground as they heard All Might call the match in Toga's favor. "You should watch your punches." Toga smiled at her opponent as they walked back towards the group. "You put your full weight behind your first punch and upset your balance. It was pretty easy to topple you when you'd already done half the work for me." "Yeah, a rush-down strategy didn't work in my favor at all." Sato rubbed the back of his head. "Maybe a counterpunch strategy would have worked better. We can try next time we're paired up." Toga grinned at him. Sato nodded as he chuckled along. "That was great, Himiko-chan." Izuku praised his girlfriend as he pulled her into a hug. Toga smiled beautifully as she snuggled into his arms. "Thanks, Izu-kun." Toga hugged him back. The two turned to observe the second-to-last match. I was Toru versus Jiro. Izuku was pretty sure Jiro had a distinct advantage in this matchup. He was proven right when Jiro, the moment the match started, plugged her jacks into her boots and blasted the area Toru stood in with sound waves. The invisible girl had cried out at the attack and her gloved hands came up to her ears to try and block out the noise. With Toru incapacitated, Jiro had unplugged one of her jacks and sent it zipping across the space between them. The invisible girl seemed to jolt from the sound waves Jiro blasted directly into her body. The match was quickly called in Jiro's victory. The rocker helped her friend back to her feet and they walked back to the group together. Match J was the final pairing and it pitted Ochako against Tsuyu. The two took their places on the field across from each other. All Might began the match and Ochako immediately had to jump to the side to avoid Tsuyu's long tongue. Tsuyu demonstrated a good handle on mid-range combat. Ochako was doing everything in her power to not get caught, while Tsuyu was merely staying mostly in the same place and launching her tongue. Eventually Ochako rushed her friend and Tsuyu took the opportunity provided. The frog-like girl's long tongue struck Ochako like a punch. The brunette staggered for a second, but it was all revealed to be part of her plan when she grabbed Tsuyu's tongue. A pink glow covered the tongue and Tsuyu herself. With a battle cry Ochako jerked the, now weightless, Tsuyu and tossed her by the extended tongue. Tsuyu ribbited in shock as she was whipped through the air. Ochako let go, but didn't expect Tsuyu's tongue to wrap around her arm. While she might currently be weightless, that didn't affect her ability to generate force. Tsuyu reeled in her weightless body and as Ochako was panicking, and failing to get the frog girl's tongue off her arm, she struck. The highly developed legs of Tsuyu slammed into Ochako's torso. The powerful muscles uncoiled and shot the brunette teen backwards across the field. Ochako bounced off the ground once before rolling to a stop. Tsuyu used her quirk's ability to cling to surfaces to attach her back to the ground. Ochako shakily stood up, the wind clearly knocked out of her. Tsuyu prepared for another round, but Ochako threw up onto the ground and All Might called the match. The number one hero was near instantly at Ochako's side and checking up on the girl. A minute later and Ochako was recovered enough to release her quirk. Suyu hopped over in a single leap to check on her friend. The two seemed to speak for a moment, but no one except All Might was close enough to hear them. Everything seemed to be okay though as Suyu helped Ochako walk back to the group. Both girls seemed alright, for the most part, when they got back to everyone else. "Ochako-chan, are you alright?" Toga asked her friend. The brunette smiled, even as she gingerly rubbed her lower chest. "I'm alright, Toga-chan," Ochako confirmed with a smile. "Su-chan just surprised me with that maneuver. I'll be alright." "That's good." Toga smiled brightly as she gently pulled Ochako into a soft hug. The brunette flushed cutely for a moment, but smiled as she returned the hug. They pulled away with grins as All Might got the class's attention. "Excellent work today, students." All Might gave them his signature smile. "I saw some good work out there. I'll give some quick advice before I dismiss you all, so listen up." Every student straightened up a bit as they focused on their teacher. Critique from All Might. Izuku looked like he might just start vibrating from how excited he was. Toga took his hand with a muffled giggle. "I'll start with the match we just saw." All Might nodded to Ochako and Suyu. "Both of you made good use of your quirks. Each of you was able to surprise your opponent and take advantage of their lapse of concentration." All Might gave the two of them thumbs up. Both Suyu and Ochako smiled at the praise. But, knowing how someone else might turn your quirk against you is an important part of hero work. Young Asui exemplified this when she made use of her weightless state to deliver the finishing blow. Everyone, barring Bakugo, gave applause for the frog girl's success. Suyu ribbited happily, even with a blush on her face. "Great job, Su." Toga hugged her friend. Suyu blushed slightly darker, but returned the hug with a bright smile. In the first match, young Midoriya showed excellent control of his quirk. He nearly nullified his opponent's quirk and then took advantage of that fact to end the fight quickly. Keep that in mind as you train students. Collateral damage is something heroes try and avoid as much as possible. All Might gave praise while also imparting another lesson. Izuku looked like he might pass out from a direct compliment from All Might. "That's my Izu-kun," Toga smiled brightly as she held onto his arm. Young Iida. All Might directed his gaze to the glasses-wearing teen. Iida stood ramrod straight at being addressed. "You made excellent use of your quirk and the mobility it gives you. You defeated your opponent in a single blow and that's impressive. Rendering a villain unable to continue threatening others quickly is the hallmark of a good frontline hero." "Thank you, Sensei." Iida actually saluted All Might at the praise. Young Bakugo and young Kirishima. All Might smiled at the pair. Kirishima looked excited, while Bakugo tried to hide his interest. "You both fought well. However, Bakugo, you must tone down that language. Screaming expletives is not the best look for a hero." Bakugo huffed and turned his head away a bit. "Young Kirishima, your quirk is excellent and lets you take hits, but don't let your mobility fall to the wayside. Just because you can take a hit, doesn't mean you always should." "Yes sir." Kirishima nodded to All Might with a grin. Young Kota, young Kaminari, your match was over quickly. All Might nodded to the pair. Kaminari looked pleased as it was basically praise for him. Kota looked down, either ashamed or just embarrassed. "Young Kota, we'll work on your forms to help you make use of your strength along with your quirk in the future. Kaminari, we'll refine your control over your quirk. I noticed you seemed a little off after you used it on your opponent." Kaminari rubbed the back of his head at the mention of his control. "Yes sir," Kaminari replied while the shy Kota just nodded. Young Siro, young Ishido, a most excellent match for demonstrating mid-range combat, well done. All Might congratulated the two. Both smiled at the praise from their teacher. "Mobility is an important part of ranged combat and I'm glad to see you both have made use of it. We'll work on quirk control and endurance in the coming classes." "Yes sir." Siro grinned, happy he'd made a good impression. "Sure thing, Sensei." Mina bounced on her heels. The Pinkett was all smiles. "Young Mineta and young Tokiyami, your match was also rather short." All Might mentioned. Mineta slumped a bit at the reminder of his instant defeat. "Do not lament, Mineta, we'll work on your reaction speed and mobility during these classes. Tokiyami, we'll be looking into new ways to utilize your quirk." While it is definitely strong, over-reliance on one's quirk can make a hero into a one-trick pony. That isn't enough to make it in the field, eventually someone will figure out how to get around your quirk. Of course, Sensei. Tokiyami nodded to the critique. He knew he had a ways to go with both controlling Dark Shadow and fully utilizing his quirk. Young Yaoyorozu and young Shoji, both of you made excellent use of your quirks out there. All Might gave praise to both of them. Shoji nodded his thanks and Momo gave a bright smile. Some mobility training would help both of you. We'll also work on your quick thinking skills, Yaoyorozu. In a villain situation you will not always have time to think and formulate a plan. Even if you do, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, as they say, so we'll put you through fast-paced scenarios in the future to work on your response time under pressure. Yes, Sensei, I'll do my best. Momo nodded, both of her fists raised up to her chest and a look of determination on her face. Young Jiro and young Hagakure, All Might nodded to both girls. You had a quick match, a bit one-sided because of the incompatibility of your quirks. We'll work on overcoming such things, Hagakure. Yes, Sensei, Toru replied, clearly a little put out. I'll also be recommending that Midnight help you with a costume redesign. All Might informed her. Toru seemed to perk up at this, though it was hard to tell with the invisibility. With your quirk and the advancements that have been made in mimetic materials and quirk-compatible fibers over the last several years, I'm sure we can get you a much more practical costume. Yes, sir. Toru's bubbly voice returned as she pumped her fist into the air. This has been a good first class. All Might's signature smile beamed at the students again. I've gotten an idea of where each of you stands and can plan our lessons around what we need to work on. Make sure you keep giving it your all, students. We'll constantly be striving to go plus ultra in this class, so look sharp. Yes, Sensei. Class 1A chorused while they gave short bows to All Might. Now, watch how a hero leaves like he has somewhere he needs to be. All Might laughed before dashing off so fast he was out of sight before most of them could blink. Aw man, I'm never going to be that fast. Sato lamented as they class started heading for the locker rooms to shower and change. No kidding, Hiroshima remarked. That's so freaking manly. As the guys quickly showered off the sweat of training and changed back into their uniforms, conversation naturally broke out. Some were chatting about how they did today, while others were making small talk. It wasn't until he was buttoning up his uniform shirt that Izuku was fully pulled into the conversations. Hey, Midoriya, what was that crazy move you used during your match? Kaminari questioned the verdette. You made a freaking mini sun that's so hot we were all sweating. Yeah, Yaoyorozu made a digital thermometer and according to her the temperature went from 21 degrees Celsius all the way to 36 degrees Celsius. Your match didn't even take that long. It was insane. Shiro exclaimed. None of the guys noticed Bakugo's scowl worsen as he heard their praise for Izuku. I call it Midday Sun. It's an AoE move that should be able to subdue multiple villains at the same time because of the heat it produces. Not every villain is going to be fire resistant, so I don't want to be horribly burning people every time I fight a villain. Izuku explained his move to his new friends. Yeah, that makes sense. Sato nodded as he got his tie on. Excessive force is a good way to end your own hero career early. Not to mention that no hero wants to accidentally kill someone. Tokiyami spoke up. A hero's main goal is the resolution of a situation or incident with no loss of life. Exactly. Shoji agreed as he fixed his tie and put on his jacket. Frontline heroes need to be strong. No one argues that, but restraint and control should always be at the forefront of their minds. Girls' locker room. Man, Toru sighed as she fastened her skirt. I didn't do very well today, did I? It was just a bad match-up, Toru. Hyoka assured her friend as she pulled on her tie. You'll get better with practice. Yeah, Toru-chan, this class is all about getting better, right? Ochako smiled at the invisible girl. Plus, All Might is going to have Midnight Sensei help you redesign your costume. I'm sure that'll help out too. Mina hugged her invisible friend. I can help you with your hand-to-hand if you want, Toru-chan. Toga offered with a smile. Stealthy girls like us have to be able to handle ourselves, right? You girls are the best. Toru quickly tried to pull all 7 girls of Class 1A into a group hug. After the impromptu hug fest was over, Toga pulled on her shoes and checked her phone. With a grin, which was quickly noticed by Mina, Toga bounced slightly. "Oh, what's got you so happy, Toga-chan?" Mina teased the blonde. "Izuku sent me a text saying he'd meet me in the classroom to grab our bags." Toga smiled happily at her phone. "We're going to a crepes shop we noticed a few days back. It's a little after-school date." "That's so cute," Toru gushed as she danced around. "I wish you a good time, Toga." Momo smiled at the excited blonde. "Have fun." Kyoka grinned, though her cheeks were noticeably pink. "Let us know how the crepes are too." Ochako giggled, she liked sweet things. "Will do." Toga laughed as she quickly left the locker room and jogged, almost ran, through the halls to get to 1A's room. A few minutes later and Toga was approaching the room. With a grin she threw open the door and skipped into their homeroom. Izuku was waiting there and smiled brightly when he saw her. Toga nearly glomped him as she rushed forward into his arms. "Excited, Himiko-chan," Izuku chuckled as he hugged his girlfriend. "Yep." Toga pecked his cheek. She quickly grabbed her bag and slung it over her shoulder. Izuku offered her his hand and they left the classroom together. They walked through UA's halls, across the front campus, and past the UA barrier with smiles on their faces. The couple took a train to the next station and disembarked. Walking down the street they quickly found the crepe shop and entered. They were seated and given menus quickly. Toga happily looked at all the options along with Izuku. Toga eventually decided on a strawberry and chocolate crepe while Izuku got a blueberry crepe. While they waited for their treats they made idle talk, mostly about their first heroics class and what they expected for tomorrow. 1 strawberry and chocolate, and 1 blueberry. The waitress, a young woman with a quirk that apparently let her freely control the color of her hair, if the ever-changing locks were any indication, smiled at the teens. "You two are a cute couple," she commented with a giggle. Toga beamed at the woman and Izuku blushed slightly. "Thank you." Izuku's cheeks were warm, which made Toga giggle at him. The waitress left and the two took their first bites. Toga cooed as she ate. "It's great. Sweet, but not too sweet. I like it." Izuku agreed with her as he enjoyed his crepe. A few bites later and Toga offered Izuku a bite of her crepe in exchange for a bite of his. The couple happily took a bite from each other's crepe, mixing the flavors of each treat a bit. Izuku noticed a bit of whipped cream on the corner of Toga's mouth. He tapped the same spot on his face and Toga blinked in realization. Izuku jolted slightly when he felt something brush his leg. He swiftly realized it was Toga's foot. The little minx had apparently gotten her shoe off and was now rubbing up and down his leg with her sock-clad foot. "Himiko-chan." Izuku's face was fully red now. "You can't get mad at a girl with cream on her face, now can you?" Toga giggled as she ran her foot up to his inner thigh before pulling back. "You're an evil little minx, aren't you?" Izuku mumbled before he took a large bite of his crepe. "You know me so well, Izu-kun," Toga teased, the tip of her tongue poking out from between her lips. "Not in public, Himiko-chan," Izuku reminded her with a shake of his head. "Boo," Toga playfully pouted, puffing up her cheeks cutely. "I've spoiled you too much, haven't I?" Izuku smiled fondly at her. "Completely rotten," Toga agreed with a giggle as she leaned over and stole another bite of his crepe. "Hey," Izuku pulled his crepe away from his playful girlfriend. From over by the entrance to the back their waitress watched the cute couple with a giggle. They were absolutely adorable. She noticed a few of her coworkers thought the same as they'd glance at the couple before looking away with soft smiles. Izuku and Toga paid for their crepes before heading for home. Toga was wrapped around Izuku's arm again, and Izuku had a warm smile on his face. The couple got on their train and sat next to each other, Toga's head on Izuku's shoulder and Izuku lightly resting his head on top of hers. Both of them were content and looking forward to their future classes and becoming heroes. "What in the world?" Izuku blinked as he saw the crowd of reporters gathered in front of UA at the gate. There had to be a crew from every news station in the Tokyo metropolitan area. Even a few from outside of Tokyo too. Did something happen? Toga wondered as she and Izuku walked closer to UA's gate, hand in hand. What's it like to have All Might as a teacher? A reporter asked as soon as they caught sight of Izuku and Toga. The verdette pulled his head back slightly as a microphone was shoved into his face. Can you back off? Toga glared darkly at the reporter shoving their mic into her boyfriend's face. Her free hand started drifting towards her hidden butterfly knife. Whoa, 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 what are you all doing harassing our student listeners? Present Mike, loudly, asked of the large group of reporters as he jogged onto the scene. You're interfering with our students' ability to get to school. If you don't calm down and step back, we'll have to get the police involved, you dig? Several of the reporters backed off at seeing the well-known hero and hearing the threat of law enforcement being called. We just want to know about All Might. A reporter called out to the pro. All Might isn't available for interviews today, so you can all leave. Aizawa replied blandly as he walked up and stood next to Present Mike. And why should we listen to such a shabby-looking man? A different reporter demanded. Aizawa just exhaled heavily. This is why he hated the media. You know, they're causing such a ruckus, they're almost like villains. Present Mike whispered to Aizawa. You think we could get away with roughing them up a bit? Not unless you want your reputation dragged through the mud. Aizawa shook his head at his longtime friend. Nezu's already called the police. So let's just wait. While Aizawa and Present Mike kept the reporters back, the students could finally walk past the gate and get to class. Izuku and Toga walked towards their classroom together. Neither of them had planned for a reporter mob today. One of the reporters had gotten a little too brash and tripped the security sensors shortly after the last of the students had entered. She was met with UA's primary security feature, also known as the UA barrier, a massive steel gate that slammed into place before she could get near it. With over a meter of reinforced steel between them and any form of All Might interview, the multitudes of reporters had no choice but to complain and wait. The arrival of the police a few minutes later to usher the reporters off the sidewalk and street in front of UA was even more unwelcomed. -1 a classroom. Anybody else planned for a reporter ambush this morning? Mina huffed as the class chatted before homeroom. Seriously, back off a bit, right? You said it, Jiro agreed with the pinkett. I didn't expect to get harassed for an interview about All Might's position as a teacher on the way to school this morning. They kept asking questions and shoving each other, so I couldn't even answer anything. Kaminari sighed, not enjoying his first time in front of reporters. I'm glad the teachers showed up when they did, Suyu stated with a cute croak. Yes, they were becoming rather rude. Momo nodded in agreement to the frog-like girl. Take your seats, homeroom is about to start, Aizawa announced as he entered the classroom. All of them rushed to comply so he wouldn't start glaring with his quirk again. After lunch, foundational heroics. Today we'll be working on costumes. All Might announced to the class with his signature smile. Now that you've gotten a feel for your costumes, you may have noticed some things you want to change. In that regard, I've called in Midnight to help with the girls while we guys look over what we could improve on together. That's right, Midnight opened the door with a flourish. The beautiful teacher walked into the classroom with a strut she'd become famous for during her career. Most of the guys in class found their eyes drawn to her. Toga was happy to see Izuku only had his normal, fanboy look in his eyes, instead of the almost drooling Mineta and Kaminari were doing. Let's look over these costumes and see what we can improve on, ladies. The 7 girls of Class 1A all gathered around Midnight, while the boys took up spots around All Might. Chatter quickly filled the classroom as small whiteboards were given to those that wanted them. Papers covering each student's costume were in All Might's and Midnight's hands as they looked over each of the designs. With the girls, I like what I'm seeing for most of your costumes. Midnight nodded as she looked over the designs. Form, functionality, and style are good for most of you. But we can always strive to make them even better. The girls smiled at their teacher happily. The first 2 I think need the most help are Toru-chan and Momo-chan. Thank you, sensei. Toru bowed, completely serious. I've come to realize I didn't really put much thought into my costume and the design company didn't seem to take my request seriously either. Your quirk being invisibility can make costume design difficult. But in this day and age, technology is practically devoted to quirks. Midnight encouraged Toru with a bright grin. We'll go over a list of materials for a proper costume and discuss mimetic fibers and polymers that we can integrate. Yes, ma'am, Toru chirped happily as Midnight took a tablet from the front podium and brought it over. We'll start by going over basic materials and then move on to more complex designs and functions. Sound good? Midnight asked the girls with a soft smile. Yes, sensei. All 7 chorused back with smiles of their own. Wonderful, Midnight chuckled. Now, I noticed a lot of you have used padding of Kevlar or other protective material. This is a good start, but the skin-tight suits don't allow for much layering. We'll look at carbon nanofibers first, as they have great tensile strength, while also providing protection and not limiting mobility or flexibility much. She tapped the tablet screen and brought up a display for the girls to see. The girls watched the short video about carbon nanofibers and some took notes. It never hurt to think about more protection in the field. With the boys. Now, is there anyone that has any questions about their costume already? All Might inquired as he looked over the 13 boys he was working with. Not seeing any raised hands, he continued on. Are there any questions about the costumes of your classmates? An outside eye can, oftentimes, be an asset when considering redesigns. A few hands went up at that and All Might smiled widely. Now he was engaging his students. Young Zero, what is your question? Not to sound rude, I didn't want to say anything right away since I didn't know what the costume could do, but Mineta, what's up with the armored diaper thing? Zero questioned as he pointed to Mineta's costume sheet. I wanted to protect my junk. Mineta replied instantly. All of the guys were torn between agreeing that was a good thing and wondering why he chose a diaper-like design. I think I might have made it a bit too thick though. I can admit that it does look kind of like a diaper. Maybe have it redesigned a bit to be slimmer and more form-fitting. Not a bad idea. All Might nodded to the short teen. While looks and aesthetic aren't everything to a hero, if you plan to be on the front line, image can be very important. I have a question. Izuku raised his hand. Yes, young Midoriya. All Might gave Izuku the floor. Todoroki, you have ice covering your entire left side. But your quirk deals in ice and cold already. From our match I saw that you can freeze over when you push your quirk far enough. Wouldn't a heating system of some kind be better than further lowering your body temperature? Izuku questioned the two-toned teen. My left side isn't the same as my right, was Todoroki's response, delivered in the same flat tone Izuku remembered from their match-up. Different how? Hiroshima asked curiously. When it didn't look like Todoroki was going to answer, All Might stepped in. Young Todoroki's left side produces fire, rather than ice. All Might informed the group. He took notice of the minute twitch the teen gave off when he spoke of his fire ability. Wait, you have ice and fire. Kaminari looked shocked before he pointed at the other teen. That's totally overpowered. If you can produce fire to the same degree as ice, you'll be the first person that I've met that could potentially match my own pyrokinetic abilities. Izuku looked excited at the prospect of having someone to train his pyrokinesis even further with. I won't use my left side in battle. Todoroki denied and the other 12 teens, plus All Might himself, looked either shocked or concerned. Can you not control them or something? Shoji questioned him, concern in his tone. You won't use more than half of your quirk. Bakugo growled at Todoroki. What, you think you're so much better than me that you can half-ass your way through UA? Huh. The rest of the group, barring Izuku who just sighed heavily, all started at Bakugo's aggressive behavior and angry tone. When Todoroki refused to respond, Bakugo got even angrier. The blonde stood from his seat, practically growling while he glared at Todoroki. All Might thought it best to intervene before things got out of hand. That's enough. All Might spoke with finality. Even Bakugo flinched slightly at the tone. With a sneer at Todoroki, Bakugo returned to his seat. We can discuss quirks at a later date. Now we are focusing on costumes and how to improve them. Left unsaid was that All Might planned to bring up Todoroki's refusal to use the fire part of his quirk to Nezu and Hound Dog. The outright rejection of one half of his quirk set off alarm bells in Toshinori's head. Without knowing the limitations of each other's quirks, I can't make accurate suggestions. Izuku shook his head. Maybe if we spent a little time on that, then we could suggest alterations and materials for redesigns. Midoriya makes a good point, sensei. Iida spoke up in agreement. Very well then, All Might relented. We'll have a quick overview of your quirks and current limitations so that we can make accurate suggestions. With the girls. So, for Toru-chan, we'll need to have Recovery Girl take some blood and hair samples for testing. Quirk-compatible fibers and materials don't work for everyone. But if yours do, then I'd suggest this optical fiber weave for the costume overall. It can become any color it needs to be, even clear and transparent. If your cells or hair are capable of being worked into your costume, then the mimetic fibers will be blended and cross-woven into your costume to enable physical coverage as well as full invisibility. Midnight clapped her hands together as she smiled brightly at Toru. Then you add in the carbon nanofibers for protection and Toru-chan's costume covers functionality and protection. Mina grinned happily as she looked over what the group had come up with together so far. That just leaves style. I think a one-piece design would work best, or maybe a jumpsuit. Suyu offered her opinion on the style of the costume. That's probably for the best. Toru agreed as she looked over the various ideas. Since it can change color and even become transparent, would you need a specific color scheme? Jiro wondered, since colors on a costume were often what helped identify a hero at the site of an incident. I'd probably not go too crazy if I had a set color scheme. Toru admitted with a hum. Just a cute color combo would be enough for me. A few of the girls giggled at that. Midnight smiled on at her students as they brainstormed. Well, until we get your samples taken and tested, we'll put this on pause and move on to Momo-chan's costume. Midnight moved the class along to the next girl that could use some help. As a fellow heroine that needs skin exposure for my quirk to work the best, I've been through a few different designs of costume. Momo was paying the utmost attention to Midnight, in hopes of gleaning some of the pro's experience. You'll want some protection, of course, but skin exposure can be had even with the restrictive laws on the books. A few of the teens noted the tone that Midnight had spoken about the laws with. Toga, Momo, Jiro, and Suyu wondered what kind of history their teacher had with said laws. It took a few moments for Momo to think back about hero laws and find a memory that she thought had relevance. With a slight jolt, the tall Ravenet looked at her teacher. That's right, your original costume is what caused the Costume Decency Act to be created and applied. I remember now, they said your original costume was too scandalous. Momo spoke from memory. Yeah, Midnight almost looked like she was pouting. Those old fossils said my first costume was the equivalent of a flasher. Can you believe that? I had everything properly covered, I made sure of it. It let me freely use my quirk too. Nowadays I rely on these thin mesh materials so that I can conform to the laws and still be effective when doing hero work. Wait, I remember that, I was super little though. Ochako spoke up. I remember Mom and Dad talking about a young heroine that revealed too much skin. She almost got in trouble with the police because they didn't understand her costume on a few occasions. Yep, that's the trouble of having a quirk that needs skin exposure. Midnight sighed, her head hung slightly as she cupped her right cheek. They vetoed my second costume idea too. They said it wasn't more than lingerie. I had to argue about the third costume idea. But a leather outfit that covered everything and obeyed the new laws couldn't be denied. She giggled as the cheeks of some of her students went red. Toga and Mina both snickered along with their teacher. Aside from the potential for a wardrobe malfunction, what's wrong with Yaomomo's costume? Jiro questioned, trying to get the class back on track so she'd stop feeling like her cheeks were on fire. It actually covers too much of her skin. Midnight smiled at them. She completely covers her back, one of the largest areas of skin on the human body. With a bit of a redesign, we can prevent any wardrobe malfunctions and open up more area for her quirk to work with. Not to mention incorporate some more utility functions. It's always good to have options in the field after all. That's true, Momo trailed off, her hand on her chin as she took on a cute, thinking pose, as she thought over ideas. What would you suggest, Sensei? I'm thinking we go a bit tactical. Midnight smirked as she tapped and swiped on the tablet for a bit. After some time she flipped the tablet around to show the girls. Some sounds of surprise and appreciation followed, making Midnight smile. I like it. Toga giggled happily. With the guys. Wait, so you're saying you can completely fry your brain and you become an idiot? Sato blinked at the kickback of Kaminari's quirk. Yeah, Kaminari sighed as he admitted to his lack of control with his electricity. It sounds like what happens when there's a power surge and the lights and electronics go out. Tokiyami spoke up thoughtfully. You need something that acts like a surge protector, Izuku suggested as he flipped through his new notes on his classmates' quirks. Maybe a support item that has the same functions and can prevent you from shorting out. That would be nice. Kaminari agreed as he looked at his hand and sparked his quirk. I don't want to be a one-hit wonder and then be a liability in the field. We'll look into ideas and designs for you, young Kaminari. All Might gave the teen his signature smile. We'll definitely work on quirk control often, but it never hurts to have a backup or fail-safe in place for emergencies. Similar idea for Tokiyami, too. Hiroshima proposed as he looked at his bird-headed classmate. Some kind of light source that you could activate in the event you lose control of your quirk. A contingency measure would be appropriate. Tokiyami nodded his agreement with the red-haired teen. If light were to suddenly become scarce while dark shadow was already free, I would at least have my own source of light to rein him in before he could hurt someone. Sentient quirks are rare, so having a way to bring yours back under control is good thinking, young Tokiyami. All Might grinned at the boy. I'd suggest some kind of amplification device for Kota. Iida motioned to the large, shy teen. Though I believe voice-related quirks can sometimes be interfered with when put through electronic devices. I'm not sure, actually. Kota's quiet voice spoke up as he tapped his fingers together. It was a nervous tick, most probably, for the shy young man. Well, we can test that out in a future class, young Kota. All Might gave the teen a reassuring grin. Present Mike uses amplification equipment all the time. I'm sure he'd be of great help in figuring out how gear might affect your quirk. Why yes, sir, Kota replied, just barely above a whisper. The class carried on from there. When it was time to end the class and dismiss the students, both All Might and Midnight felt they'd made very good progress today. After school, dusk. Damn heroes, a raspy voice growled, its owner's face hidden under a hoodie, while wearing baggy black pants. So secure, so in control of things. The raspy voice took on a hard edge as the person reached into their hood and scratched at their neck. Letting everyone smile like fools. The person walked down the sidewalk towards UA's front gate. Originally the plan was to strike at lunch, sowing chaos to cover their plans. But on suggestion from Sensei, they'd made a change. After all, if there were students on campus, then the heroes would spread out to protect them. That could leave their infiltrator to get caught by accident. That was no good, but if they sent their little declaration of war after the students had all left, then the alarms sounding would bring all of the hero staff of UA running like dogs called by their master. He chuckled as he got closer and closer to his target. Are you ready, Kurogiri? He spoke into the phone on his ear. Yes, Shigaraki Tamura. The person on the other end of the line replied cordially. It's time to declare war. Tamura cackled with glee. There was a demented smile crawling across his face. It's time for you heroes to realize that you're not so secure after all. With that he stepped into the sensor's range at the main gate of UA High School. An alarm went off immediately. The blaring was followed by the UA barrier slamming closed for the second time that day. With a twisted smile on his face, Tamura reached out and touched the reinforced steel gate with all 5 fingers of his right hand. The steel began to corrode. Rust seemed to spread like a wave across the metal. Tamura grinned as the impenetrable UA barrier crumbled away into a cloud of rust. Quick as a blink he bolted across the empty street and down into the forest that led into the town below. As soon as he was out of sight, a black-purple cloud swirled into existence and he ran through it. Welcome back, Shigaraki Tamura. A person, seemingly made of the fog-like material, welcomed the hoodie-wearing man. Hurry up and carry out your part of the plan, Kurogiri. Tamura snapped at the suit-wearing person. Of course. Kurogiri's black-purple fog swirled around him and then shrank into itself until nothing remained. At UA, what the hell is this? Aizawa questioned as the entire staff stared at the destroyed gate. Nothing but rusty dust remained of the barrier now. We're not sure, Vlad King replied to his fellow homeroom teacher. The cameras caught a man in a hoodie and black pants tripping the alarm and destroying the gate with a touch. He bolted as soon as he was done. This could never be called a prank, Ectoplasm stated seriously as they remained on guard while inspecting the area. To cause this much damage in such a short time doesn't bode well. What the hell was the point of this though? Midnight questioned, her eyes narrowed at the destroyed gate. As a villain picking a fight. Have you discovered anything, Power Loader? Nezu questioned, looking at the ruins of the gate. Only piles of rust and fragments of steel littered the ground. It wasn't chemical, I can tell you that much. Power Loader replied as he examined a few of the larger pieces. No malformations, no melting, no discoloration that you'd get from acids or bases. I can rule out heat too, there isn't a scorch mark on any of these pieces. Not to mention the way it was destroyed is completely different from how heat destroys steel. All of these pieces are brittle though, like they've been left outside, exposed to the elements for decades. A disintegration quirk, Nezu murmured after a moment of thought. Activated by touch and able to spread within a certain distance. That's most troubling in the hands of a villain. Such a deadly ability in the hands of one who is willing to use it to attack UA of all places does not bode well. Principal, Hound Dog called out to the Chimera as he returned from the forest with a few of Ectoplasm's clones. Were you able to track our assailant's scent, Hound Dog? Nezu asked the counselor, his hands behind his back. No sir, Hound Dog shook his head. The scent completely disappears about 20 meters into the forest. It's like they just vanished. That's most troubling. Nezu grimaced, his face showing he was thinking and trying to put all the pieces together. Sir, I covered the rest of the campus. All Might spoke up, having just rushed through the area looking for anything out of place. Anything? Nezu questioned the number 1 hero. No sir, not a single door or window had been touched. Recovery Girl is checking the cameras on every single entrance too. All Might exhaled, maintaining his form thanks to not having a strenuous foundational heroics class today. I've met my fair share of audacious villains, but I've never met one that just ran away after causing so much destruction. Usually they're the ones that want to stay and fight. Yes, to attack and run shows either cowardice or intelligence. Nezu nodded as he continued to think. If the school itself hasn't been breached, then I'm not sure as to which our mystery attacker is. The fact that they disappeared so completely is troubling. All Might mentioned as he looked over the ruined gate. There are only a few types of quirks that can do that. None of which are good when used in this manner. Nezu hummed, thinking through quirks like teleportation or warping. Our attacker may well have had an accomplice to pull this off. Great, All Might sighed. He'd need to be on guard for suspicious persons around the school. This reeked of an opening attack. I wonder what we're doing today. Ochako wondered aloud as Class 1A waited for Aizawa. All of the teens were eager to put the morning classes behind them and get to their hero training. Not surprising for a class of hero students to be fair. Well, we did combat in the first class. We went over costumes last class. Maybe this time it'll be on support operations or something. Suyu suggested with a thoughtful look on her face. Whatever it is, it'll be better than the regular old classes we do in the morning. Toga grinned at her friends brightly. She would do fine in the basic courses with Izuku's study help. But she'd joined the hero course to prove she could be a hero despite what everyone had thought about her quirk when she was growing up. I hope it's exciting. If you lot would settle down I could to tell you. Aizawa drawled. The entire class started a bit from the sudden words. No one had even seen the man come in. The 20 students went silent and faced forward intently. That's better. Their homeroom teacher mumbled before he pulled out a card and showed it to the class. Today you'll be doing rescue training to prepare you for floods, fires, and other disasters. The card in his hand had the word, rescue, on it in bright red letters. A few in the class broke out into excited murmurs at this announcement, much to Aizawa's irritation. I'm so excited, Ochako cheered with a bright smile on her face. Several of the class couldn't help but smile or chuckle at the happy brunette. Rescue is what I plan to specialize in when I go pro. Cute. Toga giggled to herself, seeing how bouncy Ochako was being about their class today. That's my plan too, Ochako. Suyu ribbited happily, sharing a smile with her brunette friend. I'll be right at home in flood rescue scenarios. I'm already pumped. Let's get started. Kirishima raised his fists in front of his chest. Quiet down, Aizawa commanded as he activated his quirk, causing his eyes to glow red and making his hair levitate noticeably. The students instantly stopped their chatter. Stop making me use my quirk. You're giving me dry eye. He grumbled out annoyed. He pulled out eye drops and applied them. Now, it's up to you to choose whether to wear your costume or not. Some of them may not be suitable for certain scenarios. The location we'll be training at is a bit remote, so we'll be going by bus. That'll be all. Get ready and don't waste time. He gave them all a long stare before grabbing his yellow sleeping bag and leaving the room. Rescue training, a good challenge for my control. Izuku nodded to himself as he grabbed his case. His case was much larger than the other students because of his axe. The verdette's gaze sharpened with determination as he headed for the boys' locker room along with the rest of the guys. In short order, Class 1A was changed into their costumes and getting onto the bus. Toga quickly pulled Izuku into the back and cuddled up to him. Izuku could only smile fondly at his girlfriend and indulge her a bit by pulling her into his side and letting her snuggle, head patting her with a smile. The two chatted quietly about the upcoming training. Most of the girls, mostly Toru and Mina, cooed at the cute display. We're here. Look sharp now. Aizawa slipped out of his sleeping bag with practiced ease as he stood up and led the class off the bus. A few minutes later and everyone was off the bus and walking into the massive dome-shaped building. When they saw everything that was inside the building, most of the students let out excited exclamations. Holy crap, are we at Universal Studios Japan? Kaminari questioned gleefully, making several others turn and deadpan at him. Not quite. A voice, that seemed like it was being heard through a speaker or old radio, called out to the group. Ochako perked up as the group turned to face the speaker. There's the flood zone, the conflagration zone, the landslide zone, every disaster you can imagine. The woman speaking wore a very puffy astronaut-styled suit and yellow shoes. Her arms were held wide as if to welcome them all. Oh, Izuku exclaimed, his eyes bright as he recognized the hero. It's Space Hero 13. She's one of the top-rated rescue heroes in Japan. Toga couldn't hold in her giggles at seeing Izuku fanboy over a pro again. I love 13. Ochako was bouncing up and down in excitement, her brown eyes sparkling as she looked at the pro. Everyone in Class 1A was fairly certain they knew just who Ochako's favorite pro hero was now. This training ground that I created is the perfect site to put your heroism to the test. I call it, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. 13 introduced with a flourish. Everyone could practically hear the smile in her voice, even with the speaker filter. It really is USJ. Several of them exclaimed, comparing the two acronyms against each other. 13, where's All Might? I thought he was supposed to be meeting us here. Aizawa questioned his fellow instructor. Well, 13 sighed, before subtly holding up 3 fingers. I'm afraid he got caught up in quite a few incidents on his way to the school this morning. He's exhausted himself. At the moment he's resting in the break room, though he did call to tell me he would try to make it to the latter half of the class. That man is the height of irrationality. This was precisely why I suggested that he just move onto the campus already and be done with it. Aizawa exhaled while pinching the bridge of his nose. Well, no point in wasting time, we'll start without him. Of course. But before that, I have 1 or 2 points. 13 said, before pausing. Or 3, maybe 4, her voice started sounding a bit sheepish as she continued. Perhaps 5, or 6. The entire class deadpanned and sweat dropped. Well, as I'm sure many of you are aware, my quirk is called, Black Hole. It draws in and breaks down everything. Ochako was nodding along with their instructor, her eyes still sparkles. Cute. Toga giggled behind her hand as she watched Ochako practically bounce in place at being so close to her favorite hero. Yeah, you've used it to save countless numbers of people in almost every disaster imaginable. You break down debris and free trapped civilians and even clear roadways for medical vehicles, police, firefighters, and everything. Ochako did her best Izuku impression without even meaning to. She was just so excited. That's right. Indeed, my power is capable of saving many lives. But it would also be incredibly, frustratingly easy to use it to kill. That put a damper on the excited mood of the students, bringing down the intensity so they were all paying attention. Just as I'm sure it would be uncomfortably easy for some of your own quirks to take a life. In our super-powered society, the usage of quirks is heavily restricted and monitored. It may seem like a stable system, but never forget that it only takes one wrong move with an uncontrollable quirk for people to die. 13 warned the hero students. During Aizawa's assessment test, you were able to touch upon the true power of your quirks. With All Might's person-to-person combat, you experienced the danger of using your quirks against other people. Today will be a different story. Today you shall learn how your powers can be used, not in combat, but to save lives instead. The space-themed hero had her arms spread wide, as if to indicate the whole of the USJ behind her. Before 13 could continue, the lights all over the dome began to flicker strangely. Everyone looked around in confusion at the odd phenomenon. Kaminari, an electric quirk user, blinked and tilted his head at the lights. He recognized the signs of fluctuating electrical output due to practicing with his quirk growing up. What's going on? Aizawa questioned as he took charge. His students were his first priority in the event anything unplanned happened. Something's gone wrong with the power. 13 sounded confused as she looked up at the flickering lights. It was his experience that drew Aizawa's attention to the small distortion forming down in the plaza. The underground hero glared at the anomaly as he reached into his scarves to pull up his goggles. A black, smoke-like hole tinged with dark purple had formed in the center of the plaza. 2 glowing yellow eyes appeared and seemed to glare at the surroundings for a moment. The smoky mass expanded outwards, swirling wider and wider before a hand emerged from within. Another hand emerged to join the first, almost like they were pulling apart a curtain. What emerged was a man's head. But there was nothing normal about it, at all. He had what appeared to be severed hands covering his body. On his arms, around his neck, and even on the front and back of his head. The one on his face was acting as a macabre version of a mask. Between the fingers of the hand mask, a demented red eye glared hatefully at them all. Then, before the eyes of both teachers and all 20 hero course students of Class 1A, more and more people started coming through the black-purple smoke. Each one of the emerging people had one thing in common, a malice in their gaze that promised violence. This isn't part of the class, is it? Hiroshima questioned as they beheld the large group coming from the smoke-like portal. No, Aizawa stated flatly, his tone dead serious. Those are villains. No way. Why would villains break into UA? Every teacher is a pro-hero. That doesn't make any sense. Mineta cried out in panic. 13. Aren't there intruder sensors here? Momo asked the pro. Of course, there are. But they're not activating. I'm even using the manual override. 13 revealed the small device in her hand. It was a control for the USJ's systems. The touchscreen was filled with a single message. System not responding. Kaminari, try to reach the school with your personal communicator. Aizawa instructed as he partially unwound his capture scarves. Yes, sir. Kaminari nodded as he tapped the device on his ear. Ow! Damn it! The blonde exclaimed a second later as he practically tore the communicator off his ear. Even from a distance everyone could hear the horribly loud shrieking of feedback interference coming from the device. They've jammed the frequencies, he called out as he held his ringing ear. I doubt they snuck into the main campus as well. They picked the perfect time to attack here, with the fewest pros and multiple targets. They clearly have an objective and have brought in quirks to reach that objective, which includes someone capable of jamming outgoing signals. Todoroki was still calm in the face of this danger, or one of the few able to keep his cool at least. The large, swirling smoke-like portal closed after a large monstrosity of a creature emerged and stood behind the man covered in severed hands. Before anyone could move though, the man covered in the severed hands spoke loudly for all to hear. Huh. This is strange. The man spoke with a raspy voice. The schedule we stole said All Might, 13, Eraserhead, and Class 1A would be here. So where's All Might? He questioned, scratching at his neck, his red eyes staring at everyone up on the platform with nothing but disgust. 13. Get the students out of here, Aizawa ordered as he pulled on his goggles and leapt down the stairs towards the large group of villains. With his capture scarves in hand he picked out his first targets. 13 was corralling the students and urging them towards the exit, but that option was quickly cut off when the security shutters around the USJ began to slam closed. The humanoid fog villain appeared in front of them. Good afternoon, hero students. Several of the class dropped into fighting stances in front of the villain, even as 13 quickly placed herself between the villain and the students. We are the League of Villains. I hope you'll forgive our audacity, but we are here today with a declaration of war. His courteous tone did nothing to hide the outright lack of care he had for their lives. It made a few of the students of Class 1A shiver in fear. To that end, we have come to this bastion of heroism to kill the symbol of peace along with an entire class of aspiring heroes. A surge of heat, rushing through the area in a wave, it was almost hot enough to sting. A blur raced past 13 and it only slowed down when it was right beside the villain. Everyone there, barring Toga, felt their eyes widen and their jaws drop as they watched Izuku swing his axe and catch the fog-like villain by surprise. The top of the haft came in contact with a metal brace around the villain's neck and Izuku heaved with his immense strength. The villain blurred past the stunned students and went rocketing towards the monstrous villain down below. The humanoid fog slammed into the hulking beast. The oil-black skin appeared to ripple from the blow, but the villain didn't even blink. The fog villain crumpled to the ground to the surprised exclamation of the hand-covered leader. Kurogiri, what the hell happened? The man demanded of the suit-wearing, humanoid fog. Shigaraki, Tamura, run. Kurogiri managed to get out before his yellow eyes disappeared and his body went still. Back on the platform overlooking the USJ, everyone blinked in shock at what Izuku had done. The verdette was bulked up and a massive heat haze was pouring off his body. Without waiting for anyone to say anything, Izuku hefted his axe. The head of the axe began to glow with heat and the vents on either side of the head erupted into flames. With 3 blindingly fast strikes, the steel security shutters were slashed clean through. Izuku kicked the cut section with one of his powerful legs and the steel flew backwards almost a dozen meters outside. A large hole now existed for the students to escape. 13. I'm going to assist Aizawa, please get everyone out of here, Izuku requested of the pro-hero. Toga. Izuku looked at his girlfriend with a warm smile. Make sure they all stay out of the building, please. All right, Toga agreed with a small smile. Don't do anything crazy, Izu. I want you back in one piece as soon as you're done. It's a promise. Izuku chuckled before leaping away and landing in the plaza with a crash. Midoriya, wait. 13 reached out with her hand but the team was already in the plaza. Let's go, everyone. We need to get out of here. Toga yelled loudly, shaking her classmates out of their stupor. Right, 13. 13 shook herself for a moment before focusing on the students she could reach. Yes, everyone outside immediately. 13 corralled the remaining students towards the large triangular hole in the security shutters. Screw that, Bakugo yelled back as he turned towards the plaza. If Deku is fighting then I'm going to fight too. You will not. 13 all but ordered the ash blonde. Bakugo turned to argue, his mouth open to yell. Unless you want to be suspended for disobeying an instructor during an emergency, you'll do as I say and evacuate. Bakugo snapped his jaw closed at the threat. Midoriya is already in trouble for going off on his own. Do you want to share the same punishment? No, Bakugo growled out and Kirishima placed his hand on the explosive teen's shoulder. Dude, come on, I don't like leaving Midoriya behind either. Right now, the best thing we can do is escape so that the villains don't get their way, Kirishima stated, though his tone was subdued. Bakugo scoffed angrily but followed the rest of Class 1A through the large hole and outside. Kaminari, please try and contact the school now that we're outside, 13 requested of her charge as she stood facing the hole in the wall. Her hand was held out, ready to deploy her quirk if any villains should emerge to cause them harm. Yes ma'am. Kaminari put his device back on and activated it. Hey, I can get through now. Contact the school and tell them that villains have attacked the USJ, we need reinforcements. 13 instructed as she kept vigilant watch on the only way out of the USJ at the current time. Kaminari quickly did as asked, contacting the emergency line that led to Principal Nezu's office. Plaza, Midoriya, what are you doing here? Evacuate with the rest of the class, now. Aizawa ordered his student as he parried a punch and kicked out his opponent's knee. The sudden arrival had startled the majority of the villains, small-time thugs really, but a few had tried to capitalize on the distraction. Aizawa had quickly shown that he wasn't distracted, however. There are more villains in the USJ than the ones here, sir. Izuku's towering form responded. I noticed people in the waters of the flood zone before I jumped down here. Even you can't fight 100 or more villains by yourself. You'll exhaust yourself before help arrives. The rest of the class is evacuated already. Now it's just a matter of waiting for reinforcements. You should be outside with them. You're a student, your safety comes first. Aizawa responded sternly as he erased a thug's quirk and slammed his fist into the shocked villain's face. The man hit the ground like a sack of rocks. I know the spirit of self-sacrifice is in a true hero's nature, sir. Izuku's heat continued to increase, forcing the villains near him to back away as their skin began to burn. But leaving someone behind to die is against everything a hero stands for. Izuku stomped on the ground, cracking the concrete below his foot. I'm fully prepared to accept whatever punishment I will receive for disobeying you. But I refuse to let someone die if I can save them. The heat spiked more and several villains yelped in pain from being too close to the hulking teen. Nomu, kill that brat! Shigaraki demanded, pointing at Izuku with a deranged look in his red eyes. The massive monstrosity gave a horrible shriek as it blurred forward. Izuku braced himself and took the punch. The ground cracked and the verdette was sent flying backwards from the punch. Kill him. Make sure he's dead. Nomu blasted forward, even as Aizawa erased his quirk. I know I erased his quirk. How is he still moving that fast? Aizawa wondered in shock as he tried to race towards his student. He needn't have worried. You have some strength, don't you? Izuku questioned as the dust cleared. He was holding back the Nomu's fist with just his left hand. I was shocked. He smiled at the monster. Not many can actually make me feel their blows. Nomu shrieked again and Izuku gave a light chuckle in response. In the next instant Nomu was across the plaza and Izuku's right fist was extended. But you aren't that strong. What the hell? Shigaraki exclaimed, unconsciously taking a step back in shock, along with a bit of fear. What kind of hack's bullshit are you pulling? You were the ones that attacked us. Izuku turned to face Shigaraki, staring the villain down without fear. You brazenly and without hesitation declared your intention to murder all of us. Izuku took a step closer to the hand-covered villain leader. You don't get to complain about your choices now. The terrible shriek of Nomu reverberated throughout the USJ as the beast charged forward, still mindlessly continuing to try and carry out the orders it had been given. Shigaraki, seeing his weapon still in fighting condition, regained his confidence. As the two powerhouses clashed again, sending a shockwave from the point of their collision, the villain spoke up. You got lucky with that last punch, brat, Shigaraki declared with a laugh. Eraserhead was nullifying Nomu's quirk, but your fists can't do anything to his shock absorption. You can try and be a knockoff All Might all you want, but Nomu is the anti-symbol of peace. He was bioengineered to kill All Might. Good to know, Izuku mentioned as he blocked Nomu's punch. Since this thing isn't human, I don't have to hold back. The temperature spiked instantly. Villains screamed as their skin burned while Aizawa was far enough away that he only broke into a heavy sweat from the heat. The villains ran away from the blazing teen and the bioengineered weapon as they continued to clash. You can punch him all you want. His shock absorption can stand up to All Might's power. Your flames are next to worthless too. Nomu also has hyper-regeneration. Shigaraki cackled as he watched Izuku and Nomu continue to exchange blows. Suddenly, both of Nomu's arms, just below the elbow, fell off. A strange black ichor splattered onto the ground from the grievous injuries. Even still Nomu only paused in its attacks. The weapon never registered pain, It literally couldn't. My attacks have no effect? Izuku questioned, Shigaraki only now noticing the axe that Izuku had drawn from his back. Who decided that? I didn't even see the ing swing. Shigaraki realized, a bit of panic seeping into his mind. If he wasn't already sweating heavily from the sheer heat Izuku put off, he'd have broken out into a cold sweat. Nomu's arms quickly regenerated and the beast launched itself at Izuku again. My flames are useless. Izuku formed a ball of fire above his palm. The fireball looked like a miniature sun, only it was changing, the heat continuing to rise. The center of the sun changed to a white so bright it was painful to look at. In the very middle of the flames was a tiny core of intense blue fire. Who decided that? Nomu slammed a fist into Izuku's chest at full force. The verdette didn't even flinch from the blow, much less move backwards. The teen merely dripping blood from the corner of his mouth. Steam and smoke were coming off Nomu's body from being so close to the ridiculously high heat that Izuku was controlling. Shigaraki recoiled at seeing that Izuku was somehow still getting stronger. I will be the one to decide, Izuku intoned with finality. Cruel sun. The miniature sun slammed into Nomu point blank. The abomination's flesh burned, boiled, and then was vaporized. The altered structure of its body could withstand immense amounts of physical force. But with heat in excess of 3,000 degrees, cells simply ceased to be. The attack vaporized the head, arms, torso, and legs of the Nomu. Only its feet remained, charred and blackened on the floor. The fireball continued straight forward, like a cannonball, scorching everything that got close to it. Shigaraki screamed in agony as he practically burst into flames from sheer proximity to the mini-sun. His flesh burned, the moisture in his body, most specifically his arms, which he'd instinctively raised to try and protect himself, turning to steam while his flesh was dried and blackened. A massive blast went off as the fireball detonated against the far wall. A large hole was simply gone from the USJ, revealing the outside. Aizawa stared in shock at the power that his student wielded. The villains in the plaza all looked at the incinerated Nomu, the flailing, burned Shigaraki, and the unconscious warp gate user, in fear. Collectively, every villain in the plaza that was still conscious put their hands behind their heads and kneeled on the ground. In the next few seconds, every villain was face down, hands behind their heads, in a show of complete surrender. A wise choice, Izuku uttered loudly, spitting the blood in his mouth out. You have no idea how hard it is to not accidentally incinerate someone when I'm going all out. The villains all began to tremble at the warning from the teen. Outside of the USJA bus pulled up at speed before screeching to a stop. The doors were practically torn open as the pro heroes of UA High rushed out to check on Class 1A. Seeing 19 teens and 13 instantly prompted questions from Nezu. The sound of police sirens was quickly closing in on the location. 13. Where is young Midoriya? Nezu questioned his faculty member. The tone brooked no argument or excuses. The chimera-like principal only wanted straight facts. Midoriya rushed off to assist Aizawa with the villains before I could stop him. Principal. I'm sorry. 13 bowed her head as the pros quickly made their way towards the triangular hole in the wall of the USJ. Everyone stopped when a massive blast went off and they felt the ground shake slightly. Part of the wall of the USJ seemingly erupted into flames before vanishing completely. There were only small bits of debris raining down over the large empty lawn that surrounded the facility on all sides. What the hell was that? Present Mike exclaimed in shock at seeing the blast. Izuku. Toga screamed, her worry for her boyfriend overriding all else as she bolted towards the hole in the wall. She was blocked by 3 of Ectoplasm's clones and growled at the obstruction. Miss Toga, we don't know the situation inside yet. Remain out here while the teachers take care of the villains. The Ectoplasm clone on her right instructed Toga with no room for argument. That was Izuku. If he's using that much power, then something must have gone wrong. Toga yelled back at the clone of the pro hero. The actual Ectoplasm had already entered the USJ along with the rest of the teachers to try and get a handle on the situation. Police cars arrived on scene and officers began surrounding the area. This was quickly followed by ambulances and paramedics. The teens were corralled by the clones of Ectoplasm away from the USJ. The police were moving closer to the triangular hole to get a grasp of the situation. Inside the USJ, Holy Midnight breathed out as she saw dozens upon dozens of villains surrendering on the ground of the main plaza. Aizawa and Izuku standing over the group looking much better than any of the teachers thought they would after getting the emergency call. There are still many dozens of villains left within the facility, Nezu informed, his eyes, ear, and nose telling him so and his incredible intellect already making plans. Split up and capture all of them. They appear to be common crooks, but take no chances, let's move. Yes, sir. The pro-heroes replied in unison as they headed down the stairs and began to spread through the facility and into the various disaster zones. The roundup of the common thugs wouldn't take very long for seasoned pros. Aizawa, I need a situation report, immediately. Nezu mentioned as he walked towards Class 1A's homeroom teacher and the towering verdette next to him. Midoriya appeared to be safe, which was top priority. The heat haze coming off the boy also seemed to be making the surrendered villains in the plaza tremble. Yes, sir. Aizawa replied as he pulled his goggles off. The sounds of fighting, mostly Mike's loud quirk, could be heard as the teachers started dealing with the remaining villains. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.